Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. It's another remix episode. That's the bad news. But the good news is Bruce and I are set to record all new content tomorrow. So stay tuned. We are going to be dropping a new episode of Something to Wrestle. That's right. We found him, and you'll get a never before heard Something to Wrestle fresh off the presses tomorrow right here. Just check your main feed. Of course, you're going to get all these shows early and ad-free over at adfreeshows.com. But without further ado, we thought what better way to celebrate Kane going into the WWE Hall of Fame than to do a remix of Kane's debut. I think most everyone listening to this knows that the story of Kane is probably Bruce Prichard's absolute favorite storyline in WWE history. We all sort of agree that the best angle maybe the company ever did was the main event from 1988, where we had the twin heel referee. I don't think a lot of people knew that Earl Hebner and Dave Hebner were identical twins, but we found out that day in one of the best storylines ever. But this storyline is actually the one that has the most blood, sweat, and tears from Bruce Prichard. So much so that he actually named his own son Kane and spells it the same way. And really think about this. Of all the storylines over all the 30 some odd years that Bruce has been involved in the wrestling business, this is the one he's most proud of. And we're most proud that our great friend, Mr. Glenn Jacobs, is finally taking his rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Kane, aka the mayor of Knox County. And this is my way of paying a little bit of tribute to his incredible career that started way back in October of 1997. Let's get to it. Without further ado, it's the remix of episode 68, In Your House Bad Blood from 1997. All right, Bruce, it's time for What Happened When? The World Wrestling Federation presents In Your House Bad Blood. The 20-year anniversary is upon us. I can't believe that's actually real, but it went down on October 5th, 1997, and of course, it was at the Kiel Center in St. Louis. We're going to break it down in long form today. Let's go ahead and tell you first, it drew a sellout, 21,151 fans, 17,404 of those paid $212,000, over $101,000 in merchandise. And it's the second largest crowd in the history of St. Louis, only behind Strangler Lewis. He had a stadium match against Jim Londos in 1934 that drew allegedly 35,000 folks. And this is kind of a weird time in the business because we've just kind of covered how September is historically a down month. The month prior, they don't even draw 6,000 folks with this same main event, Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker on top in Louisville for In Your House Ground Zero. And somewhere around here, even though we're doing a sellout and the second biggest crowd in St. Louis history and hundreds of thousands of dollars at the gate, we're telling Bret that we can't afford the current contract. The business is kind of in a state of flux for the World Wrestling Federation right now at this point, right, Bruce?
There were a lot of unknowns. There were a lot of unknowns at WCW and our business itself, because things were changing. And I think that people will point back to this pay-per-view for, once we explain it to everybody, this is a pivotal point in the wrestling business. And this is where the winds of change were in the air. And this is where so much change started to take place for not only the WWF, but also WCW. And, people often get the whole Bret contract thing misconstrued. It wasn't, hey, Bret, we want you gone. It was, hey, we need to redo your contract for less money. We still want you. However, if you want to go get the money at WCW and they're really offering you that amount of money, we're not going to hold you back. Go get it. But we need to restructure your contract here and make it a little less.
Of course, in hindsight, I think everybody realizes that the wrestling business is on an uptick here in October of 97, and it's about to get to a fevered pitch. But when you look at September 96 versus 97, it's kind of interesting because In Your House Mind Games, which is September of 96 in Philadelphia with Shawn Michaels and Mankind on top, it didn't sell out, but it drew 15,000 folks for a gate of 210,000. Well, as we just mentioned, the month prior to Bad Blood here at Ground Zero, they only draw 4,963 paid folks for a gate of 82,000. So it's a fraction of what it was the prior September. And this is an interesting time in storyline as well. We should catch you up here that in August at SummerSlam, Bret Hart became the second man to capture the World Wrestling Federation title 5 times, the first being Hulk Hogan. All right, let's run a timeout right now and talk about Bret Hart becoming a world champion again. Of course, it happened a couple months prior to this. SummerSlam 97, he wins the world title for the 5th time, and he's only the second guy in history to do it behind Hogan. Really think about that and how different the world looks, 20 some odd years later. Randy Orton's a 14-time champion. John Cena's a 16-time champion, on and on and on. But in this era, title reigns, they just meant more, right? It felt like they weren't playing hot potato. We didn't have a new champion every week. I think that probably became more of a thing during the Attitude Era, but it doesn't feel like it ever really slowed down. And I was looking at a graphic the other day that showed all the folks who had been Universal Champion, and it's still so much more frequent than it used to be. But this is rarefied air. And, we've talked a lot here on Something to Wrestle about when Bret became the champion. People wondered within the company, how do we promote him? And Bruce has often said that the saying around the office was, what would we do for Hogan? Hogan was special, man. Hogan was the centerpiece of the WWF's explosion, and he became a pop culture icon. So to be in that rarefied air for Bret, man, that's pretty special. And it is sort of interesting to look back in hindsight and think about how the title once meant so much. And I'm not saying it doesn't mean as much now, but it does feel less special. When Hogan had 5 runs and Bret had 5 runs, but Randy Orton had 14 and John Cena had 16. And again, not disparaging those guys, just trying to add a little context. Let's keep it going. It's episode 68, the Bad Blood Remix. In the main event there, he's taking on The Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee. Shawn and Bret have an issue. Shawn accidentally clocks The Undertaker with a chair. He was intending that chair shot to go for Bret Hart, and this allows The Undertaker to drop the title, crowning Bret for the 5th time. So we've got a hot issue here with these 3 guys, because now Shawn has cost The Undertaker the world title, and Bret is going to be off to working with the Patriot. He's going to be in a match with the Patriot here as well. But I find it interesting that Bret is, getting this news about the contract and maybe some changes that need to be made there. But he's also the world champion, and he's not headlining consecutive pay-per-views here. He faced the Patriot at In Your House Ground Zero, and he was second from the top. He's positioned below The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, who don't have a title on the line. And then he'll be here on this pay-per-view, working as the world champion, although not in a title match. But again, below Shawn and The Undertaker. How much of that was strategy based on, we think we may have to let Bret go? And how much of that was just political gamesmanship behind the scenes? How was Bret with being the world champion, but not in the main event?
Well, it was storyline. It wasn't political gamesmanship. It was storyline. We wanted to position Shawn Michaels as a heel to have something that people could really sink their teeth into. And by Shawn closing the shows and giving Shawn to crow about, I'm the main event. I'm the showstopper. I'm the guy that they always have to count on. And putting him in that spot, it gives Bret something to talk about and gives Shawn something to talk about as well. That's simply storyline. That was character for Shawn and for his character, because Shawn coming back as a babyface. Shawn was a babyface prior to that Bret and Undertaker match. He was more babyface than he was heel. And we wanted Shawn to be that heel. So this was a way to give him a little bit more teeth in his bite. And by doing that, people are going, well, wait a minute, God, maybe he's right. And it gives Bret something as a heel to bitch about. And it was storyline driven to be able to put him in that position. And in addition, in St. Louis alone, that cage attraction, the Hell in a Cell, as we were told many times, this is not a cage match. This is Hell in a Cell. The attraction itself was the main event.
We'll talk about the Hell in a Cell creation, I'm sure, here in a little bit. Let's talk about where we are with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's really started to come into his own and become one of the hottest stars in the business. Even during this pay-per-view, you see a commercial for his t-shirt. In hindsight, that's kind of fun to see, isn't it, Bruce? A commercial for a single t-shirt inside a pay-per-view.
Hell yeah, because it was the single best-selling t-shirt we had ever had. It was absolutely, on fire is a metaphor we use. No, this thing was burning everything up, the Austin 316 shirt. And Steve was red hot. So it was a way to keep Steve out in the forefront without having Steve have to go out and wrestle a match. He was the hottest thing in the business.
Let's mention why he's not able to go out and wrestle the match. At SummerSlam, of course, he wrestled Owen Hart. As many of you recall, there was a tombstone pile driver where instead of Owen going to his knees, he kind of dropped down to his bottom, and that left Austin's head exposed. So he suffered what was believed to be a stinger, but then it turned out it was more significant than that. The Wrestling Observer would report, after his exam by noted Philadelphia neck specialist Dr. Joseph Torg, the current prognosis on Steve Austin is that he'll be out of action for a minimum of 2 months. Austin aggravated an already injured neck when his head was too low, and Owen Hart gave him a tombstone pile driver at SummerSlam in the match where Austin was given the Intercontinental title. Among other injuries, Austin, 32, suffered a bruise of the spine, along with his fairly significant neck problems that were a combination of both the recent jar and the cumulative effect of the wear and tear of his wrestling career. The injury has resulted in continual tingling in his shoulders, similar to if one sleeps wrong on their shoulders and wakes up with their limb asleep. The feeling was that Austin would eventually be able to wrestle, though the first doctor he saw in Texas recommended he retire and warned him that suffering another serious injury of the type would put him at risk of paralysis. Due to that, he'll likely have to modify his style in the ring and not take certain bumps that could potentially aggravate the injury. The basic prognosis is that after laying off and doing rehab for the next 2 months, he'd be re-examined, and at that time, he'd have a better idea as to when he could return to the ring. So according to the Observer here, you guys had no idea when he'd be able to come back. You just knew you wouldn't know anything for 2 months. Is that the way you remember it?
Exactly. So we wanted to keep Steve relevant on television. If he was able to come back, then we would be able to bring him back into a physical role. If he wasn't able to come back in a physical role, we would have him involved some way, somehow doing something else, whether it was an authority figure, a commentator, something else.
And in the meantime, you guys try to keep busy with his angles. And Austin is now, of course, feuding with Owen Hart, who's strutting around wearing an Owen 316 t-shirt. Whose idea was the Owen 316 t-shirt?
I think it was Owen's, actually. There was an old t-shirt. Greg Valentine used to wear a shirt. It was, I broke Wahoo's leg. And that was all the t-shirt said. This was back in the 70s or 80s, probably 70s, in the mid-Atlantic territory. And I always remembered that because that was to me, such a cool shirt. It was a heel shirt, and he's walking around with a shirt, I broke Wahoo's leg. So I was thinking, what if Owen had a shirt that said, I broke Steve Austin's neck?
Right.
And we did that on the back, but on the front, we did the Owen 316 just as kind of a takeoff on the Austin 316, thinking that heel fans or people may gravitate to that because of the Austin 316. And I think it was Owen that may have had that idea. It was either Owen or Vince, but it came from the idea of wanting to put the I broke Austin's neck on a shirt like Greg Valentine, I broke Wahoo's leg.
The I broke Wahoo's leg is actually a shirt that Tony Schiavone has in his t-shirt store at prowrestlingtees.com /WHW. But if we're going to talk about t-shirts and the popularity of Austin 316, we should talk about the hottest selling shirt over at prowrestlingtees.com. And that is the Houston Relief shirt. If you'd like to see it, it's at bruceprichard.com. And 100% of the proceeds of that shirt go directly to the relief effort after the hurricane there in Houston. Right, Bruce?
All that money goes to the Houston Food Bank, who are still feeding people that are homeless and that need some food. They're still feeding workers and everybody that's trying to clean up. You wouldn't believe the cleanup that is still needed here in the Houston area. And all those proceeds go to that effort. And you get that over at bruceprichard.com. And you also get my favorite of all time, the I Used to Be Over shirt, second most recognizable athlete in the world shirt, if that is what you do. And if you don't have a job, then I've got the perfect shirt for you. No job. Box of gimmicks, everything over at bruceprichard.com. And when you buy a shirt, I'm eventually going to call you just to say thank you. And it's been so cool calling people who bought the Houston Relief shirt and being able to talk to folks. It is amazing the number of people that bought that are from Texas.
Really?
And it's also amazing the number of people is blowing me away as well, outside of Texas, that just wanted to help and lend some support. And I thought that's been cool as hell.
Well, and we think it's cool when you support the show. It's the cheapest, easiest, fastest way to show your love for the show out in public, if you will. So pick up a shirt over at bruceprichard.com. Bruce, do you reckon that we could get Jim Cornette to sport a George the Rat t-shirt?
God damn, I love George, you motherfucker, you. Don't make fun of George, my baby. I had to console my baby for days after George died. His little frozen body in the freezer.
My goodness.
Next to the macaroni and cheese, Stouffer's macaroni and cheese. It's easy. You put it in the oven, heat it up. It's bubbly and cheesy. I put extra cheese on it. So, motherfucker.
Thank you. If you haven't noticed, the Jim Cornette impression isn't complete until I start to move on, and then Jim cuts me off with an MFer. Right, Bruce?
Motherfucker.
There you go. So since Austin can't wrestle, he's advancing the storyline by confronting those who want to protect him from himself. And along the way, they decide, even though he can't wrestle, he could still give some stunners. So he gives a stunner to the play-by-play guy, it's easy for me to say, play-by-play guy, good old JR himself. Then he stuns the color guy, Jerry Lawler. He works his way up to Sergeant Slaughter, who on camera is the commissioner of the World Wrestling Federation. But then the big one goes down in Madison Square Garden. Was the idea to always, when you started this, he's stunning different personalities and authority figures, was the idea always to end with Vince in Madison Square Garden, or how does that idea come about?
No, it kind of built to Vince just organically. And once we got into it and there were the sideways looks from Steve to Vince, Vince viewed himself as a commentator. Vince didn't view himself that people knew that he was the owner of the damn company. So Vince saw himself as the commentator and people didn't care about him and so on and so forth. And as I said, winds of change. And people were starting to boo Vince when he came out, and the stuff with Bret and stuff with Steve. And Steve did it on purpose, man. He would give Vince that sideways glance. Then we knew, oh, hey, Let's have him finally cross the line, because no one had really put their hands on Vince. Bret had pulled his shirt over. They had a little brawl there, but no one had really done anything to Vince ever. Garden, they knew Vince in the Garden. Let's do it in New York and let's stun Vince, and that will be a good exclamation point.
Do you think that when Austin was looking at Vince sideways out there, that he had any idea that would wind up where it was, or was it him just trying to mean mug everybody on camera?
I think it's Steve just, making everything as much as he could out of everything that he did. And it's no different than the time that Steve gave the sideways look to Sable and everybody went, "Oh, there's something there." It just kind of happened, but Vince had that heel about him that it was easy to come out.
Was there ever any sort of conversation about what if Steve can't come back amongst your conversations with Steve or with the office? I mean, if you guys are sitting around, talking about what you might do for Survivor Series and what the Royal Rumble might look like and what WrestleMania looked like, was there ever any real consideration that, hey, he might not be able to come back from this?
Sure. Yeah, there definitely was. And that's what I talked about in the very beginning. The unknown at this time made the business very exciting, because from one day to the next, things were changing. Guys were getting hurt left and right. This show itself, man, there was just so many injuries, and it appeared that every day there was something new, some new challenge that we had in front of us that we had to overcome. So you had to think, you had to wonder, what if he doesn't come back? If he doesn't come back, do we continue on? Is it Undertaker that we light the fire under and say he's our guy? Is it Shawn? Is it Triple H? What do we do? Thank God Steve came back and we never had to get there. There's always the hope. I think Vince is the eternal optimist, and Vince will look at things as, have a plan B, but I'm going with plan A.
Well, let's talk about the other kind of unfinished business with Steve Austin that kind of gets swept under the rug. I feel like Austin goes into SummerSlam as a tag team champion with Dude Love. And the plan originally was to have Austin and Dude Love drop those belts to Owen Hart and Davey Boy the day after SummerSlam. Of course, because of Austin's injury, that can't happen. So instead, the month prior to Bad Blood at the Ground Zero pay-per-view, they do a fatal four-way, which is a four corners tag team match. And the Headbangers wind up winning the belts when Austin interfered in the match that was down to Owen and Bulldog. So there's just a lot going on here. How was the decision made for the Headbangers to become the tag champs at Ground Zero? I got to admit, even looking back at this, it kind of caught me by surprise that they were put in this position, because prior to this, the Headbangers had kind of been positioned as, I don't know, an enhancement tag team of sorts.
To do something different, and there was no longer the issue with Dude Love and Steve with Bulldog and Owen. So without that issue for Bulldog and Owen as tag team champions to have those guys to work with, we needed to go in a new direction, and we decided to go in the direction with Owen as Intercontinental champion and kind of move Bulldog away from that. Headbangers just got the nod. You yourself just said, I never would have thought that. So
right.
It was to shock people and think that anything can happen in the WWF.
Chat me up about the decision for Austin to be as active as he was here. I think somewhere along the way, either Steve or Vince has commented that they feel like him just being forced to be on camera but do promo time as opposed to just traditional matches may have actually, in hindsight, helped his character development quite a bit and helped get him over even more. Would you agree with that?
Okay, time out. Let's talk about what if here for a moment. I think you could make the argument that one of the best things that ever happened for Steve Austin's career was his injury. I recognize how silly that sounds, and I'm sure somewhere Steve Austin is blocking me for a second time for even suggesting that. But hear me out. had Austin not been injured, would they have tried to go as hard as they did with his character development? If you recall, once Austin could no longer compete in the ring, they started to do a series of in-ring bits. Things like stunning Sergeant Slaughter or stunning Vince McMahon in Madison Square Garden and being arrested. I think that did so much for his character development that it shouldn't be dismissed. I don't know if those opportunities would have existed had they been able to just put him into a regular match. So in a weird way, I think it worked out the way it was supposed to. Now, of course, I'm not talking about how this injury cut his career short. I certainly wish he never had to have neck fusion or still didn't have some after effects from that injury today. But would he have become the king of the mountain as fast as he did, as big as he did? I mean, there was no denying Steve Austin was the top star in the company when he's out there giving a stunner to Vince McMahon. And I'm not sold on the fact that the company definitely would have still done that had he not been injured. So it is one of those fun things to think about. What if? Don't get me wrong. I'm not debating that he was going to be the top guy. He was destined for that, but I don't know that it would have happened with the force and the impact that it did had he not had all that extra promo time. You got to think there'd be less time talking, more time wrestling, but that talking, and that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so, and all the beer stuff and the stunning, all of that gaga, as Pat Patterson would like to say, really added to the allure of Steve Austin. At least from my point of view, my fandom was at an all-time high for Steve Austin because of his character stuff. And I just don't know that it would have mattered as much if he had a match with Dale Wilkes. Back to the remix here, episode 68, Bad Blood.
Wholeheartedly, I think that Steve's whole presence, I mean, just anywhere going out, and when you watch this pay-per-view and you see Steve go out during the Owen Farooq match, everything that he did, he made it mean something. He got involved in everything. Steve just couldn't just go out and cut a promo. Steve would have to go out and mess with people. And the way that Steve would cut his promo was unique, and people identified with him. He was every man, and he did the things that everybody else wanted to do or wished that they could do. So that character in and of itself lended itself to having him go down and take the hammer and ring the bell to start the match, to go over to the Spanish announce table and speak a little Spanish, and then go to the French table and mess with everybody that he touched. That's Steve Austin. That's the real guy. That's what he does in real life. So it was a way to get that personality on camera, and that was what people fell in love with.
You know, I admit that I'm not any sort of spine expert, obviously, being the mortgage guy. But it feels like if he's got some sort of spine trouble, him falling on his ass every night, giving a stunner, is probably not the best thing for him. I know it's not going the other direction, but Hulk Hogan would attribute that leg drop night after night to being the cause of a lot of his back trouble. Looking back, do you think it was smart for Austin to be running around stunning everybody during this time if he really had a significant back injury?
Well, it was his decision to do, and I think that in the end, it worked out all right. But you're right, as far as taking that bump on your ass, the compression on your spine, just your whole back is going to jar it. I wouldn't want to do it, but then again, I wouldn't deliver the leg drop every single night as a finish either. Everybody thought, hey, what an easy finish that is. It's just a bump. But it was an ass bump that I think his hips, both of his new hips, I think that had a lot to do with it.
Let's talk about some other things going on in the company. The September 8th Observer reported that Mark Henry was headed to Calgary to train under Bret Hart. And Meltzer would kind of freestyle that this is the WWF's last prayer to see if they could get anything out of their guaranteed contract they gave Henry before the Olympics. How close did the company get to writing off Mark Henry before he really started to get it?
I think Mark Henry's had a lot of last chances, and Mark has been able to come out of every one of them smelling like a rose and has improved along the way. I look at Mark Henry and I look at the last 10 years of his career, And I think that the investment and the time that was taken into Mark Henry turned out a pretty damn good talent. So Mark was somebody that had the heart and the desire and the personality. He really did want to succeed. Mark could be lazy sometimes, and that was Vince's way of trying to get Mark off of his ass. That's how you motivated Mark. And he went up to work in the dungeon with Stu and everybody up there and get away from what he was, get away from Mark's normal and get him into a different environment. And hopefully that would get him off his ass and teach him something else. And knew that Stu would love that big, strong man. Yeah, you like Luther Lindsay, you big bastard. Stu would love that.
In August, Shawn and Triple H teamed up for the first time on Raw to take on The Undertaker and Mankind. Of course, this is the seeds of the formation of D-Generation X. That would actually become a thing the next month. Speaking of the next month, sometime in September, when you guys did the shot at Madison Square Garden, where we know famously Cactus Jack comes back, Stone Cold Steve Austin delivers that famous stunner to Vince McMahon. The triangle dark match was Bret versus Michaels versus The Undertaker. Do you think that could have been a pay-per-view, or did that dynamic for the house shows not really work?
Yeah, it definitely could have been a pay-per-view, but it wasn't, that wasn't the attraction at the time. But yes, it could have been a pay-per-view. It was a great match too, that I remember.
It's just fun to look back at that and you think, man, what could have been? I mean, that could have been, I don't think we ever saw that. That would have been
okay. You want to talk about what's fun to look back and say what could have been? I want you to think about this, and this is the first time that I've postulated, whatever the hell that term is, that I've said this. Think about what if Bret Hart had said, you know what, Vince, I'll take a reduction in my contract. I want to stay here. Mm-hmm. Bret Hart, I believe, had he done that and stayed, and that he would be the Shawn Michaels of the WWF. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, you're talking about, the older statesman, the guy people revere. And I think Bret still is that to some degree.
I do too.
But what you're saying is he would have been here for the really hot times and not just sort of the transition down times. And I feel like the hardcore Bret Hart fans feel the same way, that when he went to WCW, they really had no idea what they were doing with him. So some of the really ridiculously hot years, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, Bret's not anywhere in the conversation, and he would have been at the forefront of those had he been able to work things out here.
Right. And I look at one of the reasons that Vince reveres Shawn so much is going back to that day in Montreal. Shawn did what a lot of people may not have done. If Bret had stayed, it would have eliminated the need to have done that, and he would have shown confidence in Vince, and I think Vince would have rewarded him 10 times over in the years to come. It's just interesting to think about, what if Bret had stayed, and what if he hadn't left? And I really wish that he would have, because he's Bret, and I know what his legacy meant to him.
I think everybody wishes that would have been the case, hindsight being what it is. Kind of an interesting note here from Meltzer in the September 8th Observer. He wrote, the idea of having Michaels, Rude, and Helmsley as the new clique is already out the window, although they may put Michaels in with Helmsley as they are trying to find a way to elevate Helmsley to the next level. So Dave believed that DX as a group was sort of finished before they really got going. Was there hesitation internally about trying to position Helmsley with Shawn Michaels? Obviously, they were friends behind the scenes in real life. But did Vince, who was sort of super protective of Shawn Michaels, feel like Hunter was pulling him down at that point?
Never.
Okay.
And they had chemistry backstage, and they had chemistry in front of the camera, and you could feel it. I think Shawn elevated Hunter big time. I don't think that Hunter brought Shawn down even a little bit. I think that Hunter rose to the occasion, and it was instant heat, and there was never a thought of, oh, this isn't working.
As a reminder, Ground Zero took place on September 7th. It's kind of interesting that the WWE's pay-per-view that they called Ground Zero happened in September, but obviously this is years before. Well, you know. The main event was Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker there. It goes to a no contest, which of course sets up the main event here and puts it inside Hell in a Cell. But the next night on Raw is when Sergeant Slaughter opens the show and strips Steve Austin of the Intercontinental title and announces that there's going to be a tournament to crown a new Intercontinental champion. This, of course, earns Sergeant Slaughter a stunner. How did the idea come about to have Slaughter doing a commissioner gimmick and stripping Austin? He sort of inadvertently makes himself a heel commissioner, right?
Well, the idea wasn't to make him a heel commissioner. He just was the logical person as the commissioner to go out and make that announcement. And Steve, not being a traditional babyface, he hated everybody, and even his partners he would stun and attack. So that, we wanted Sarge to be that babyface commissioner, which is the reason to have Steve go out and stun him. It got Steve over that much more.
As a reminder, Lawler would later on another show interview Austin about the restraining order that Owen Hart had put on him. You know how that ends. Austin gives a stunner to Lawler. This taping, though, is sort of interesting. This one goes down on September 9th. Neither Vince McMahon or The Undertaker are here at this taping, which is kind of uncharacteristic at the time, to say the least. Right, Bruce?
Yeah, Vince rarely misses a television taping.
The reason I'm going to mention this is because a lot of us remember this as being the moment when Shawn comes out wearing tight biker shorts, and he's stuffed his shorts to make his crotch very pronounced on television, and for whatever reason decides to start jumping up and down in Jim Ross's face as he is doing an in-ring interview and crotch chopping him, and really drawing a lot of attention to the fact that he has stuffed his shorts. He swears during the interview, and he's even calling out The Undertaker, who's on tape on the Titantron. So a lot of this has to be edited off because it is a tape show. And if you didn't know about this, you might not really piece it together, but there's some stuff they just couldn't keep from you. I believe, according to the rumor and innuendo, that he's even on microphone here, insulting The Undertaker, calling him a big chicken shit, begging him to come out, calling him other names. And of course, remember, The Undertaker is not even there. So he's burying The Undertaker to the live crowd. Were you there that night? What was happening backstage? What was the fallout for this behavior from Shawn Michaels?
I was there. I was sitting at gorilla position and watching the whole thing, livid. I was pissed because it wasn't what we had gone over with Shawn, and he had stuffed the towel down his pants right before he went out and got in JR's face. And I think it was in a lot of ways, it was a slap in the face to me and JR, because we were the ones that were running that taping. And it was, slap in the face to Vince not being there as well. Vince was not happy about it. I know Kevin Dunn was not happy about it. None of us were happy about it because it didn't follow what we had asked him to do, and the promo that we had asked him to go out and make to get to the next pay-per-view. I'll tell you the repercussions on the backside. Vince fined him heavily, but then Vince takes a turn, and this is where the whole attitude slogan era, everything came out, because Vince gets JR and I in a room and starts, pointing at Shawn and saying, what he's doing, it's showing attitude. We need more attitude. That's attitude, pal. And everybody on the roster needs to find some attitude. And attitude became the catchphrase for the next few years off of that one promo.
Really?
Really.
So the whole attitude movement began with Shawn going into business for himself and crotch chopping his stuffed shorts in JR's face.
Yes. And it went from Vince being infuriated about it, fining him, to that's what we need more of. I want penises in faces.
My goodness.
Large. Cylinder-like.
Okay.
Okay, time out. This is pretty monumental here. The idea that Bruce can pinpoint this promo from Shawn Michaels, and you remember the one, the whole stuffed crotch deal, that is the beginning of the Attitude Era. I don't know that anybody else would have been able to pull that off. Can you imagine anyone else going out there and stuffing their trunks and jumping up and down and crotch chopping JR in the face, and not only not getting fired, but it's sparking a new era for the company? Like that just, man, what a major paradigm shift and what an interesting relationship there is between Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon. Because I just assume, man, let Coco Beware go out there and pull that shit. That ain't happening. You know what I mean? But because of the relationship with Shawn Michaels, instead, Vince has to take pause and think about it. And we get a paradigm shift, a real paradigm shift. It's a very important moment in the history of Something to Wrestle that Bruce can pinpoint exactly when the Attitude Era began. Let's get back to the remix here for Bad Blood.
Hey, so hypothetically, does he give the money back?
Yeah, I have no idea.
I don't know why, but that tickles me that you would go from fining him to saying this is the shining example of what it should be.
This is what we need more of.
Right. Now, there's lots of theories at the time that Shawn was doing this because he was just an asshole, or that Shawn was really trying to attempt to be fired so he could go be with his buddies in WCW. Was there ever any sort of internal talk amongst you and JR or other people in the office that, do you think he just wants to be fired so he can go with them?
Yeah, we did. And it goes back to the old philosophy that I learned from Vince McMahon. You fire him when you want to fire him, not when they want to be fired. There
you go. That makes total sense. Well, it's been a while since we talked about Brackus here on the show, so let's talk a little Brackus. Shawn Michaels and Brackus, that's not a pairing you think you're going to hear very often, were sent to England and Germany for a promotional tour, and they wound up canceling the England portion because of the death of Princess Diana. How in the world does this pairing come together? Obviously, Shawn Michaels, one of the biggest stars in the company. I can get behind that. Who's sitting around the office and says, oh, let's send Brackus? This sounds like a rib.
He's German. He spoke the language. So he was actually a big name in the bodybuilding world and powerlifting world. And he was on several television shows over there prior to coming to the WWF. So he had name identity in Germany and he spoke the language.
We haven't ever talked about this, but on September 11th, Terry Funk holds his retirement show called WrestleFest in Amarillo. And on that card, we would see Mankind from the WWF wrestle Sabu from ECW. And we would also see Terry Funk challenge for the WWF World title against Bret Hart. How did this match come to be? We've talked a little bit about this on our Beyond the Mat episode where they showed clips of this, but I'm curious, what was Vince's reaction to Terry asking, or did you guys offer to send some talent for this show?
All three guys asked. Terry asked, Mick asked, and Bret asked. And Vince was all too happy to make it a reality for all of those guys. It was important to all three of them to do that show. And Vince had no problem with them doing it and anybody else that wanted to do it.
September 20th was the first ever UK pay-per-view, UK only pay-per-view, one night only. Quick rundown. Triple H beat Dude Love. Tiger Ali Singh beat Leif Cassidy. The Headbangers beat the Bariquas. Patriot beat Flash Funk. LOD beat the Godwins. Vader beat Owen Hart. Bret Hart retained the world title by beating The Undertaker by DQ. And then in your main event, Shawn Michaels beat the British Bulldog to win the European title. I had hoped to try to fit that in this year as a bonus episode. It didn't work out. Hopefully we can do it another time. But Bruce, there's lots of rumor and innuendo around this show because the original plan, allegedly, was for Bulldog to go over in the main event. But then the day of the show, according to the rumor and innuendo, Shawn talks Vince into letting him go over. And, of course, the plan is he's going to promise to drop it back to Bulldog. We know that never happened. One night only. Were you there? How'd this go down?
I was there, and we all talked Vince into changing the finish for more heat. And I think everybody saw it as a, happy, joy night. And we looked at it and go, what's going to be better? Is it Bulldog walking away with the championship, or is it to do the swerve and have Shawn win the championship and walk away with heat? That was the decision. It wasn't a conspiracy or anything. It just was, what is the best outcome for this pay-per-view for the future? And we felt that Shawn with that belt, with the heat of beating Bulldog in his hometown, was better.
As a reminder, that show goes down on September 20th. 2 days after this is when Vince tells Bret that he's unable to pay the new 20-year contract, and Bret is free to start negotiating with WCW. So this is like 6 weeks or so before Survivor Series, maybe a little longer. So at this point, Vince has to start, at least internally, trying to figure out a way to get the belt off of Bret if he's going to at the same time tell him, I can't honor the 20-year contract. When did you become made aware that Vince was going to have this conversation with Bret?
I was probably made aware that weekend beforehand, but again, Vince didn't know what Bret was going to do. Still, he was going to give him that opportunity. Deep down, I think Vince really was kind of hoping that Bret would stay and work it out. So he, again, being the eternal optimist, was thinking, well, damn, Bret will stay and stick this damn thing out and fight with us. But I won't blame him if he goes and takes the money either, because it's a lot of money. I'm going to give him that opportunity out of respect for Bret. So Vince sometimes will just stick with that mindset. Now, I'm thinking about what you just said. Okay, we got to get the title off of him.
Right.
What if he doesn't? What if, he says, we're gone? What's next? So we all knew that we were looking at Steve Austin, and we were looking at Steve Austin for the future. But do we get there now? Do we wait? We knew that WrestleMania was going to be the crowning of the era of Stone Cold. But we continually wanted to get there.
So let's talk about what's next, of course. September 22nd, where we're talking about this conversation happening, is Madison Square Garden. And they've got 14,615 fans there for these television tapings. They're going to draw big money, $258,000 at the gate, $97,000 in change and merchandise. And on this card, we see Ahmed beat Rocky Maivia in the Intercontinental title tournament, which is kind of interesting in hindsight that Ahmed beat The Rock. LOD would beat Farooq and Kama by DQ. Owen would beat Pillman by DQ, also in the Intercontinental tournament. And then after the match, Austin would attack Owen, and because of the restraining order, the cops come in and arrest Austin. This is when Vince McMahon comes down, asks the cops to wait, and gives the speech to Steve Austin about how everybody cares, including the World Wrestling Federation and the fans, and he just has to learn to work within the system. Austin does his, I appreciate the fact that you can kiss my ass, and he kicks and stunners Vince. Is this the worst stunner in the history of stunners, Bruce?
Well, definitely the worst stunner in the history of stunners up until that point.
Sure.
There have been a few other stinkers, but it's in the top two.
Now, the other one you're thinking about is Donald Trump.
Trump's wasn't that bad, was it?
No,
it was horrible. Yeah. It's probably in the top two. So the two billionaires probably took the two worst stunners.
Yeah, I think
Vince got much better as time went on, and he got used to taking them.
I'm curious, and I know we'll talk about this later, but that day, does Vince ask anybody how to take the bump? Does he practice? Does he watch tape? I mean, how do you guys get a billionaire ready to take a stunner?
He just went out and took it.
Obviously.
I mean, there wasn't. Probably should have been.
When you're in the back and you see the way he takes it, I assume guys are crowded around the monitor because it's very rare that something like this physically happened to Vince at this point. What's the reaction from the boys when they see the way he took this stunner?
Oh, that's pretty much it. You know, I had to open up my big mouth and made some stupid comments, but you know, he had never done it before, and that was his first attempt at working in the ring, so to speak. But I think he made it his mission going forward. And then everybody, you know, Rock tried to take the stunner different every single time he took a stunner. You know, Hunter would try and take it different every single time. Shane would try and figure out a billion different ways to take the damn thing. And I think everybody, if you're in that rotation of getting the stunner, then you figured out different ways to take it every night. Vince finally got around to it.
Well, you set the stage here when you said I had to open my dumb mouth or whatever you said and make some dumb comments. What'd you say? What got heat? What got back to Vince?
Oh no, I said it to Vince. I said, now I understand why your dad never wanted you to work in the ring. And boy, that was open mouth, insert foot.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, bad. You know, timing's everything. Timing was horrible.
Are you saying this to him as soon as he walks back through the curtain?
Pretty closely thereafter.
My goodness. How old were you?
But again, I was kidding. I was ribbing on the square and I was busting chops. And there's a time and a place
that wasn't
to bust the chops of the owner of the company and your boss. That wasn't one of them. Lesson learned.
Oh, it's so great. We mentioned earlier, it's also the Raw where Cactus Jack would make his first WWF appearance, and he defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley in a street fight that night. And as a reminder, this is where we start to see all three different gimmicks. We'd already met Mankind, and we had met Dude Love, but now we're introduced to Cactus. What was the reaction backstage to seeing how the crowd reacted to Cactus Jack?
They were shocked that he was over as strong as he was over. And that's a testament to Mick Foley. The Cactus Jack character, he made it mean something. He made it larger than life. He made it that underlying, don't go there in his psyche. So that's a testament to Mick Foley and his ability to pull off all the characters that he was able to pull off. And it's funny how Mick kind of turned the tide from Cactus Jack being that really scary character to Mankind being that scary character that you don't want to go back and tap into. And he did that over years. Whose
idea was it to have Cactus Jack come to the World Wrestling Federation?
I think in this particular instance, I think it was Hunter's. Because it was well, Russell, you know, we've done Mankind, we've done Dude Love. What if we saw Cactus? And everybody lit up like, oh shit, that would be cool. Vince didn't get it right away because he wasn't a fan of Cactus Jack, but he was a big fan of Mick Foley and figured Mick could pull it off, which he did.
Also in this same show, Bret would beat Goldust by submission. Bret wouldn't break the hold, and Michaels and Helmsley hit the ring and started attacking Bret with help from Rude and Chyna. Of course, Owen, Bulldog, and the return of Jim Neidhart would happen to help clear the ring out. And Meltzer wrote, funny to see Neidhart attack Rude, who by agreement isn't allowed to receive any blows due to his legal settlement with WCW. Rude didn't seem too happy about it, and Bret didn't sell for Michaels either. finally the Undertaker came out and the ring ended up cleared except for Bret, Michaels, and Undertaker as the show went off the air. And of course, we know that was the dark match. Any memories about this Jim Neidhart, Rick Rude situation where Rude wasn't supposed to be touched and maybe Neidhart didn't get the memo?
Well, yeah, Rude was not supposed to be touched due to his Lloyd's of London deal. And coming in, Rude could not be, he could touch people, but he couldn't take any bumps. And I just don't think anybody ever smartened Neidhart up beforehand.
If we know that we're not going to be moving forward with Bret Hart, why is Jim Neidhart coming in here?
As a favor to Stu.
No, that's what I thought. The Observer would report that Yokozuna would be moving to Stamford, Connecticut, and he was expected to return because he was still under contract, even though he'd been off TV for quite some time at this point. Do you remember that was an original plan to have Yoko move to Stamford?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think Yoko was going to move to Pennsylvania near Offa, but I don't remember him ever coming to Stamford.
Around the same time, and we've covered this on our Vader episode, October 6th is the Observer where they covered this All Japan Pro Wrestling and World Wrestling Federation / FMW show, which happens at the Kawasaki Baseball Stadium. I mention it because this is where we get the Ultimate Fight Rules cage match with Ken Shamrock and Vader. If you'd like to hear more about that, it's covered in great detail in our Vader episode. Bruce was involved there as well. And it's there if you'd like to hear more about it, but we're going to keep moving here. We start to see, some more DX hijinks on the September 29th Raw. And that was actually taped on the 23rd in Albany, New York. By comparison here in Albany, they only drew 4,100 fans to a Raw, and you would see Shawn and Helmsley playing the total smartass. And on that same show, we would see Farooq beat Ahmed by DQ in the Intercontinental Tournament, and this advances him to the finals where he's going to meet Owen, which is, of course, a match we're about to cover. But Meltzer reported here that the original plan was for Ahmed to face Owens in the finals, but he got hurt. This feels like something that just routinely happened with Ahmed. We covered this earlier this year where he was allegedly supposed to be in the main event of a pay-per-view for the world title against The Undertaker, and he got hurt. Well, now here, he's supposed to be in the finals for the Intercontinental title with Owen, and he got hurt. Do you remember anything about this injury or what the original plans were?
You reach a point where they all kind of run together. So it just wasn't a guy's injury prone and continually comes up lame. After a while, they all just run together, and you start wanting to plan things for them and around them.
That same show is where we see McMahon confront Austin and give him three alternatives. He's either got to get a doctor's relief, sign a waiver absolving the WWF, or be fired. Of course, he picked door number 2, and they start promoting him in non-sanctioned matches starting on October 18th in Fort Worth. But Meltzer reported that that's still not a guarantee. He still needs to be cleared. Was the thinking, even though we don't have the clearance from the doctor, he's feeling pretty good, so we're going to start advertising him in the local markets just to boost ticket sales?
Well, we knew that even if he couldn't wrestle a match, he could appear and he could do some physicality. But the prognosis was also looking really good.
Right.
And he was feeling a lot better, and we were getting every indication that he would be cleared and that he would be fine. He just needed to rest. This
is the show where we see Austin having some sort of interaction with Owen, and Owen for the very first time debuting his Owen 316 shirt. We talked about the shirt earlier, but we didn't talk about how Austin felt about the shirt. This can't be something that Austin was in favor of, right?
No, he was. It was a heat seeker, and it was furthering it was all about Steve, and it was all about his stuff. So when you think of Owen 316, I'm not going to get that. I'm going to get Austin 316, the real thing. I don't remember there being any heat there at all.
Okay, timeout. Bullshit. My bullshit meter is still going off all these years later. Bruce's insistence that Austin wasn't upset by the Owen 316 shirt. Of course he was. There's absolutely zero chance that the Steve Austin that we hear do interviews all the time, who talks about, being dropped on my damn head and damn near ended my career, blah, blah, blah. Now the guy's got a fucking t-shirt for it. Not cool. I'm sure that's the way Austin feels. No, I've never talked to him about it, but I just feel comfortable in assuming that that's the case. And it's kind of silly that Bruce is still defending it. Bruce is kind of silly. Let's get back to it.
So we've kind of set the stage for how we got to this pay-per-view, but I want to give you a comparison for where they are with WCW at the time. September 1st, Nitro was unopposed and did a 4.73. September 8th, Nitro does a 4.3, Raw does a 2.2. The next week, Nitro does a 3.9, Raw does a 2.6. September 22nd, Nitro is 3.7, Raw is 2.4. But September 29th, Nitro does a 4 and Raw does a 2.7. So it's going back and forth here, but firmly Nitro is in control. How big are the ratings in September and October of 1997? Are you guys waiting around the fax machine with bated breath every Tuesday? What's the routine for these ratings coming in?
The routine was usually USA would call Vince's assistant, and Vince's assistant would call us. That was normally how we got them. We just, it was a big deal. We waited. Not, when you're getting your ass kicked, you're not as excited to get that news, to find out how badly you got your ass kicked that week. Sure. It's kind of like, oh shit, they came in. What were they? And if you were up, then we stopped right about, I want to say in November, maybe December that year, where we stopped looking at ratings. We stopped, it was almost like the dirt sheets. Don't read them. Don't look at them. Don't worry about them. And we started worrying about the business that was in front of us and our house shows and our pay-per-views and moving forward, and figured that if we built that up, that everything else would follow.
Well, here we are. We're at the pay-per-view, and the show opens with the Bad Blood graphic and the music playing. Of course, a lot of you probably recognize, I think this is Steve Blackman's ring entrance music later on. And then on the free-for-all, they announce, of course, that Brian Pillman has passed away after wrestling the night before in St. Paul. We've covered his death and the way Vince and the company handled this in long form on our Brian Pillman episode. So if you're a really big fan of Brian Pillman, I can't recommend that episode for you enough. It's probably one of our more detailed, certainly one of our first very detailed stories. Vince would mention this again during the Nation of Domination's entrance. Anything else that maybe we haven't touched on that we should regarding Brian Pillman's passing and how you guys got that news that day that he had passed away?
I think for the full, comprehensive story, go back to the Pillman episode, because we did cover it in detail. It was a sad day. It was tough to take. And I'm the one that unfortunately, Cornette actually got the news and put me on the phone, and it was a terrible day and hard to take, but not a good way to start your day.
All right. Well, let's keep going here in the show. And I should mention, there is an interesting story about how they get the news and how Vince tells everyone to respond, that you should probably go out of your way to listen to that Brian Pillman episode. Kama Mustafa and D'Lo Brown are going to be tagging with Rocky Maivia to take on the Legion of Doom here in a 3-on-2 handicap match to get us started. Ken Shamrock was in St. Louis and planning on wrestling, but he wasn't able to take any bumps due to his lung injury. And obviously with everything that's happening this day, they probably just make the decision not to risk it. Right, Bruce?
Yeah. Kenny was not in any shape. Kenny was still coughing up blood, and we just didn't want to further that injury and have him miss more time. So the decision was made, keep him off. He had just made that trip to Japan. So it probably shouldn't have done that, but we did. And the decision was made, nope, let's keep Kenny off.
They go about 12 minutes and 20 seconds before the Legion of Doom get the Rock up for the Doomsday device. That they managed to get him out of that position, the Nation of Domination do. And then all of a sudden, Hawk gets pinned with the Rock bottom. So a fun little interesting opener, because it's something that a lot of us, myself included, don't really think about the Rock ever really having an opportunity to work much with the Legion of Doom, but here he is on pay-per-view with them. What did you think of this match watching it back?
Again, you know, we talked about this recently. I was shocked at how Animal moved. Good God. Joe looked really good during this time. And the match itself, I thought they had a good match.
Yeah.
For what it was in the opening match, it was exciting. It was good. It told a story. And you go back and watch it and you see, okay, man, The Rock is the guy. Yes, he is, without a doubt. But it made me appreciate even more. The other one that stood out big to me was Godfather. I thought he looked great in this match. And going back, I was shuddering watching this on the network, because I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be a match that I can fast forward through and do some, or I can do something else while I'm watching it. And I sat there and just watched the damn thing going, good match.
I should mention here that Meltzer did not give any star ratings for this pay-per-view. He wrote, I really can't give a fair assessment of the show. It appeared that none of the matches were any good except the main event, which was a strong candidate for match of the year. I'd give the show a thumbs in the middle, but it's hard to really give you any feelings on the show. And we should frame that statement so you understand. Brian Pillman was pretty friendly with Dave Meltzer, so he would have been watching this show just minutes after learning that he had passed away. So he's probably in a different state of mind, which explains why we're not going to be covering star ratings here from the Observer. But if you had to give this first match a star rating, Bruce, and don't use your 6-star line, how many stars would you have given this match?
2.5.
Okay. I didn't expect a real answer.
Well, you asked me a real question.
Yeah, I just wow. Kudos.
Now, if it was in the Tokyo,
I knew it. I knew it was coming. Vince referred to Rocky Maivia as Rocky Johnson during the match. Did you see that when you watched it back?
Especially in those days when The Rock would do the shuffle, before he would throw a punch. He looked just like Rocky. So yeah, you could make that slip from time to time.
This is not too long after Rocky has turned heel and joined the Nation. I can't wait for us to talk about that. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Bruce.
No, you bring that up, and I just, it's funny to me, and it's not funny, haha. It's actually laugh out loud, enjoyable to listen to the commentary 20 years after the fact.
Right.
And Vince with this, oh, what a maneuver. And then Jim Ross right behind him. That's an enziguri, Jim would come right on the heels of Vince's. Oh my, that would be a fisherman suplex. And they would just continually, I'm laughing. God, it's so different from the way the commentary is now. And Vince was so frigging over the top, and I can see him in my head talking out of the side of his mouth. And then from there, and JR and King going back and forth. Got any more one-liners there, Henny? And the commentary in and of itself is extremely enjoyable on this pay-per-view as well.
Yeah, it's fun to go back and revisit Vince as a commentator. And it's kind of an interesting note here that this is the last pay-per-view that Vince would ever commentate, right, Bruce?
Yes, and the other fun thing is, if I had the time, I would have gone back and counted how many. 1, 2, 3. He's got him. He's got. Oh no! And look, from our vantage point, I mean, he did that so many times, that false finish in this pay-per-view. But yeah, this was Vince's last pay-per-view to be the play-by-play guy.
After this match, we go backstage and we see Sonny and Doc Hendricks plugging the Superstars line. And usually they blur this out, but for whatever reason on the network here, they didn't. I found that interesting. How do you think Doc Hendricks did in this role? Because when I look back at it, he does a better job at it than I imagined. I mean, I really wanted to make fun of this, but he did a pretty good job.
Well, come on, you can still go with the FM DJ guy. Hey, it's handsome Doc Hendricks here, everybody, here with beautiful Sonny, and we're at the hotline, and you too should call the hotline right now if you'd like to find out what the losers and the winners are saying right after their matches. And we're going right now, Sonny. Who's up next? I just always find that funny. But I thought Doc did a great job. Michael Hayes in that role worked his ass off in the stuff at the pay-per-views, but more importantly, the event center things that he did. He made them all different. He busted his ass getting it out there and selling tickets. And I thought that was a great role for him personally.
Vince then says the next match was supposed to be Brian Pillman and Dude Love. He instead offered his condolences to the Pillman family. And next up, we get a special attraction, Max Mini and Nova beating Tarantula and Mosaic when Max pinned Tarantula in 6 minutes and 43 seconds. Bruce, this feels like a last-minute replacement match for Brian Pillman. Is that accurate?
That is true.
So where do you get 4 Hispanic minis at the very last minute in St. Louis?
Mexican minis are us.
Okay.
Doesn't everybody have 4 or 5 minis hanging around backstage?
I've actually got 4 in the closet right now.
But my point exactly. I knew that you would understand. So you kind of look around and go, mini uno, mini dos, mini tres, mini cuatro, tag match.
Nova here is formerly Masquerita Sagrada. He's probably the more name recognizable and one of the more talented minis from this time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, Max Mini was the star. Max Mini was the one that we wanted to make the star, that Vince fell in love with. He's such a cute little bastard. All these guys, these were the top minis from Mexico at the time, and the guy Tarantula was the one that did the Mankind gimmick when we had the minis dress up in the characters of the WWF. There were this was probably the best of the whole group. It was a good group of little minis.
Next up, and we mentioned this earlier, there's a commercial in the pay-per-view for the Austin 316 shirt. If you had to put a real ballpark on the number of shirts you think that thing sold, like a real guess, we're in the millions, right? How many millions?
Wow.
Just freestyle.
5 million?
Really?
10 million? I don't know. A lot.
That's amazing.
It was millions plural.
Now, you guys were selling this shirt for what, $20 at the time? So, wow. Really process how much freaking money that is. That's unbelievable.
Oh, it was hot. I mean, you put Austin 316 on you put Austin anything on anything. It was all selling.
That 5 just seems hard to believe, but let's just pretend it is. $100 million in top line gross from one t-shirt design.
Not bad, huh?
Oh my gosh. Let me get a piece of that. Next up, we see Sonny come down to be the guest ring announcer. I don't really understand the point of this, but the Godwins come out first, and they've recently turned heel. And I guess when you turn heel, you just wear overalls with no shirts. It's sort of like the old school, hey, if you're going to be a bad guy, grow a beard. Right, Bruce?
Well, yeah. Isn't that what hillbillies do when they turn bad in Alabama? They take their shirt off.
Okay.
And you bring on your uncle.
Yeah, let's talk about Uncle Cletus. I recognize him, but I'm sure a lot of people may not. Who was Uncle Cletus? Where'd he come from?
T.L. Hopper.
Isn't that amazing?
Uncle Cletus was the dirty white boy, Tony Anthony. And Tony's from Tennessee. The first time that I met Tony Anthony, he was one half of the Grapplers tag team in Mid-South Wrestling and came in, or actually Southway, it doesn't matter, but he was one half of the Grappler tag team. And then he and Lynn Denton, who was the original Grappler, they took the masks off and they became the Dirty White Boys. Came out to the song, I'm just a dirty white boy, he's dirty white boy. Yeah, I don't know. I'm doing a rap version of it. But they were the Dirty White Boys. And then after Lynn retired, Tony went on to be just the Dirty White Boy with the Dirty White Girl as his manager, his wife at the time. So Cletus was Tony Anthony, formerly known as Dirty White Boy, formerly one half of the Grappler tag team, and formerly T.L. Hopper.
Hey, Something to Wrestle with fans. You love this show, and so do I. In fact, hundreds of thousands of wrestling fans each week listen to Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. And you can advertise to those fans, and it's probably more affordable than you think. Whether you sell a wrestling-related product, you're a vendor, or if you want to promote an upcoming show or appearance, we here at Something to Wrestle With have advertising packages designed to fit almost any budget. Think about it. Where else could you get a platform to speak to this many fans at the same time and get that much exposure to the audience that you are looking for than right here at Something to Wrestle With? Contact me, Matt Kuhn, by email at matt@mattkuhn.com. That's mattkuon.com to find out what we can do for you, or reach out by Twitter. I'm at Matt Kuhn Music. Help us help you find the audience that you have been looking for. Thanks. I look forward to hearing from you. Something to Wrestle With Live is coming to Detroit Sunday, October 8th at the St. Andrews Hall in Detroit.
So I went to the show in Los Angeles, and it was unreal.
The one in Baltimore before the Extreme Rules show. Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great experience.
God damn!
Excuse me, sir. I'm trying to do a commercial for Something to Wrestle With Live with Bruce Prichard.
He's a heel!
Something to Wrestle With Live is coming to Detroit Sunday, October 8th at the St. Andrews Hall in Detroit.
I did the VIP meet and greet, so I thought that was really cool. We got to show up early and got to hang out with Bruce and Conrad for a little bit beforehand.
The show was amazing. The surprise guests were awesome. Come out of a box, you're over, mother...
Nope.
Completely hilarious. The part, hands down, had to be the meet and greet.
Start to finish, the whole show was a blast.
Tweeted out what a blast it was.
I don't want anybody touching my shit.
Excuse me, sir. No one's...
Go through your shit.
No one's touching your stuff.
Touching my
I don't know.
Motherfuckers.
No.
Talk to me. Just talk to me.
Sir.
Oh my God. I'm freaking out. Just talk to
Sir,
me. Pull my
you need to
car
leave.
Up, right to the goddamn
You need
door.
to go.
Get my shit out. Put my shit in my car
So,
right there. And
fine.
walk this goddamn hallway.
Fine. Something to Wrestle With Live is coming to Detroit Sunday, October 8th at 1 p.m. at the St. Andrews Hall with special guest Jim Cornette. Tickets for this and other upcoming Something to Wrestle With Live shows are available at boxofgimmicks.com. Sunday, October 8th at 1 p.m. at the St. Andrews Hall with special guest Jim Cornette.
So there you go. Next up, of course, is the Headbangers, and these guys go 12 minutes, 17 seconds. Meltzer wrote, missed spots all over the place, including the finish, where the idea was that Mosh was coming off the top of the Hurricane Rana, but Phineas would catch him in midair and turn it into a powerbomb for the pin. Exactly what they did was a very loose translation of that description, and it looked terrible. What did you think of this match?
Well, it was hard to watch, but the point in the match that gave me goosebumps and made me cringe is when one of the Headbangers did the spit gimmick where he'd spit up in the air and then he would get underneath it and catch it back in his mouth.
Yeah, I remember that from a house show, and it creeped me out then, and it still does now.
Well, there was the announcer's warning, kids, don't try that at home. And what you didn't hear was right after that on the speaker that went only directly to me, Bruce, God damn it, tell him to stop doing that bullshit. Don't know why I remember little things like that, but that was the moment in the match that went, ugh. And the match was not one of the better outings of the evening. 1.5 stars. 1.5 stars.
So the Godwins become the two-time tag team champions here. In the match, Vince talks a little bit about Thrasher's pierced tongue. How did Vince feel about the headbanger gimmick, their look? Obviously, he hates the spit. Can you give us anything else that Vince may have thought about the headbangers?
Well, Vince actually fell in love with the headbangers because they were different and they were unique and they did the crazy stuff like the pierced tongue. I think that may have been one of the first pierced tongues that Vince had ever seen and was just like, oh, God, why would you do that? So, of course, he had to bring it up, and the headbangers like to kind of gross Vince out a little bit. Went too far with the spit thing. But Vince liked the act. He really did. He thought that it was something that Cornette had brought in, and we did them as the Sisters of Love originally and morphed them back into the gimmick that they had been doing in the Independents, which was the headbangers. And Vince just liked it. It was a different gimmick, and the guys worked hard.
Next, we see a video package of Austin, which Vince calls the month of Steve Austin, just covering everything that happened in September, which we've already kind of broken down here. And then we have Michael Cole backstage, and Owen comes in and says he's going to win the Intercontinental title, and he threatens a lawsuit if Austin gets involved in the match later. And then something kind of interesting, kind of fun for the company at this point in time. We get the introductions of Gene Kiniski and a little video package to follow. Jack Briscoe, Harley Race, Dory Funk, Terry Funk, Luthez, and Sam Mushnick all get the same treatment. We see lots of photos and clippings of their careers and a little highlight package. A real tremendous segment that acknowledges the NWA and the rich history from this territory. I thought this was very well done. What are your memories of this segment? And I know you're, really into the old school stuff. This has to kind of be the best and the worst, because on this same day, you're dealing with the loss of a coworker, but you've also got all these old timers that you just love. So what was your experience like? What did you think of the way the WWE put the segment together? Whose idea was it? How did they get Vince on board? Tell us what you can about this.
Well, I loved it. And the fact that we were in St. Louis, it made sense to have all of those guys who were all legends in St. Louis. Believe that Jim Ross was the one who originally came up with the idea of doing the Legends of St. Louis for the local market. But it also, to me, made sense nationally as well. I think the most fun that I had was the night before. Jerry Briscoe and I went out with his brother Jack, and Gene Kiniski joined us. And to be sitting at a table in a bar in St. Louis with Gene Kiniski, Jack Briscoe, and Jerry Briscoe telling old stories, I was on the floor. I didn't want to leave. Right. They did 2 last calls for us and finally brought us about, I think 20 beers. And we sat there till roughly 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning listening before finally just had to go to bed. But Kiniski was a great storyteller, and Jack, when Jack gets going, and Jack had a few adult beverages, he was one of the funniest human beings. Just such a great guy. But to be around that history and listen to these guys talk. Terry Funk joined us too, and Terry was there. Terry, imagine this, of that group of guys, Terry Funk was the one that went to bed early.
Wow.
I've got to go to bed. Vicky's waiting for me. I'm going to go ahead and hit the sack. It'll be a long day. By the way, your mother's a whore.
So that was the part that I absolutely loved the most, was being able to sit there and reminisce with the stars of my childhood and listen to the stories of things that took place during that time. And it was so cool to see, Thez, who didn't like the WWF, had always spoken out against it, but to see Lou there, to see Mushnick there and Harley and everybody in the same ring, in a WWF ring, I just thought was great. And it was the highlight for me of that whole weekend.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because a lot of guys had been pretty outspoken, kind of anti WWF. Do you remember there being any sort of sales job required to get a guy like Lou Thesz to come? Or at this point, was that all, let's let bygones be bygones, and this is the way of the world now?
It was bygones were bygones, and Lou had already done some other stuff with us, but they still like to have their comments whenever they had interviews with people. And it was cool. It was in vogue to knock the WWF. So, Jim Ross and I divvied up who we were going to call. And I had Jerry Briscoe, maybe call Kaniski or something like that. But we all just divvied it up and called them. And every single one, to the man, was happy to show up and be a part of it.
Jim Cornette has said that he went and got every single one of their autographs. It feels like this would have been like right up Cornette's alley to have some of these old legends there.
Oh, hell yeah. It was, like I said, to be around those guys and just be a fly on the wall when they were all sitting in their dressing room, which was this big, huge green room. And everyone would come in and pay their respects and introduce themselves and say hello and take pictures and what have you. There's a picture somewhere of me with all of them, and I have no idea where the hell it is. But it was so neat, because it was as if time had stood still. And here you are, you're in St. Louis with legendary promoter. And then the surreal part of it is when Vince walks in and says hello to everybody.
Right.
And, they're all showing respect to Vince, and Vince showing respect to them. It was just, it was such a tragic day with Brian Pillman. There were these just lights that brightened up the day and that made it an unforgettable day for really good reasons, to see all those guys there and having fun. And Terry Funk was so damn subdued, which was interesting, because he was around Mushnick, and he was around his big brother, and he was around Harley and Kaniski, and it was just interesting to see Terry. Terry's always going to be Terry, but he was a little bit subdued that day, and I thought it was really, really neat.
Next up, we see Doc Hendricks interviewing Farooq in the Nation about his match with Owen, and then Vince, kind of out of place here, I feel like, gives an update on Brian Pillman's death and says that authorities don't suspect foul play, but there's suspicion that it was an overdose. And he makes sure to point out that it's a problem in all sports. Bruce and I had a pretty heated discussion about that. You can hear more about that in the Pillman episode. Owen Hart wins the Intercontinental title from Farooq in about 7 minutes and 12 seconds. This happens when Steve Austin hits Farooq with the title belt. And the idea here is that Austin wants Owen to win, so he'd get a shot at Owen Hart, which was probably supposed to take place at Survivor Series the next month. And Meltzer wrote, Hart looked like he was mentally somewhere else, probably because he was.
Man, I can't imagine being one of the boys that night and hearing that one of our great close personal friends, someone we've quote unquote gone up and down the road with for all these years, has passed away. And then a few minutes later, hey kid, what do you want to do in your match today? That's got to be a tough position. And no, I'm not suggesting that they should have stopped the show or they should have canceled the show. I understand in show business, the old adage is the show must go on, but it does just go to show you that, man, sometimes wrestling just kind of sucks. I'm not saying that this could have been avoided. I mean, I would have loved to have imagined that all of this could have been avoided. But unlike our other fandom, Superman never dies. Batman never dies. It just goes on and on forever and ever. But golly, what a legacy Brian Pillman left behind. And I'm so glad to see that Brian Pillman Jr. is getting to pursue his dream. But what a shame it is that Junior never really got to know his dad. And even though, you know, we all sort of grew up watching Brian Pillman, we didn't know him, but we think we did. This is one of maybe the first wrestler death that I remember and that just took the wind out of my sails. And when I think about Bad Blood, sure, I think about the first Hell in a Cell, but I think about Brian Pillman first. And I don't know, man, just feel for everybody in that locker room. And of course the family who, you know, in the middle of us trying to promote a wrestling show here for the World Wrestling Federation, we also have to make such a tragic announcement. Just terrible.
Before we talk about the match, what was the relationship like between Brian and Owen, and how was Owen this day?
The relationship was, they considered them family, and Brian had done a lot of his training up in the dungeon in Calgary and had wrestled in Calgary for Stu Hart. So, you know, that he was a part of the family. Brian was part of the family. So Owen was definitely somewhere else and not, you know, probably not as engaged as he normally would have been. But the match overall, the story of this match was, I thought, excellent. Gotta enjoy it. I'm a fan of Steve Austin. So to have Steve come out there and Steve doing all of the antics that he did, going to the French table, going to the Spanish table, taking JR's hat, taking Vince's headset, being the timekeeper, up and down and all around, and his comments on the match, to me, made this, you know, a 4-star match.
Yeah, Austin on commentary here reveals that he's a star if you weren't sure, and that he can do anything. And he even refers to Owen's shirt as cheap heat at its best on microphone, which I thought was pretty awesome.
Exactly.
We didn't, I don't know that we covered much of this on the Brian Pillman episode, but obviously Steve Austin is in a featured spot, you know, headed to be the top guy in the business. And now one of his best friends, his former tag team partner, has passed away. Did you have a conversation that day with Steve Austin about Brian Pillman?
No, not that day. Steve was pretty torn up.
Yeah.
And Brian and Steve were best friends. Everybody was pretty torn up. And you're walking along, and the show must go on, unfortunately. So you got to get your game face on, and you got to move forward. I think to outsiders that appears really cold and insensitive. However, when you're in the moment and you've got a job to do, you know, unfortunately, when you and I pass, well, maybe not you, but when I pass, the world's going to go on, and life's going to go on for everybody else.
Let me just make a weird observation here. There's a rumor out there that Owen Hart was supposed to beat the Godfather at Over the Edge for the Intercontinental title when he had his accident. Do you know if the plan was that the Blue Blazer was going to become the Intercontinental champion that night?
Yeah, we had the mini Blue Blazer under the ring. Yeah.
I find that, I don't know, worth noting that Owen wins the Intercontinental title here on the day that Brian Pillman passes away, and he was supposed to win it on that day at Over the Edge in 1999. This was not a great match. What did you think of Owen and Farooq here?
It wasn't a great technical match, but the story and the package overall, I thought was great. That's why I say I'd give it 4 stars because of the story surrounding it.
No, I agree. With Austin, it makes it another thing, but the actual, as you like to say, when the bell rang, maybe not the best that either one of these guys have done, but given the circumstance, who can blame them?
Right. And again, it wasn't about the bell ringing in this particular match.
Next up, we've got the DOA, which is Brian Adams. And, of course, he's wrestling here as Crush. And we've got the Harris brothers, Ron and Don, and they're in here. And this is kind of interesting, I guess, because I believe it's Chains and Skull. Is that right? Or is it Chains and 8
Correct.
Ball?
No, it was It was Chains, Skull, and 8-Ball.
And Brian Lee being the other odd man out here. Brian Lee.
Well, Brian Lee was okay.
Brian Lee was Chains. Right. Skull and 8-Ball are the Disciples of Apocalypse, Ron and Don Harris, the Harris brothers.
Right.
This group looks awesome. I mean, they look like a badass biker gang from cable TV. But as far as the match goes, it kind of is what it is. This is probably the worst match on the card. They're taking on the Los Boricuas, which are Miguel Perez, Juan Rivera, Jose Estrada Jr., and Jesus Castillo. They go 9 minutes and 11 seconds when Crush pins Castillo after a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker. And they only had, according to the Observer, a few minutes to get dressed and put a match together because everybody's sort of shuffling around. Once the Brian Pillman news breaks, they've got to sort of retime the card. So normally you would see DOA ride their bikes to the ring, and Vince even makes mention of that under traditional circumstances, you would see the DOA ride their Titan motorcycles down, but they didn't here. Who puts this match together? How are you guys scrambling around in the back to make it happen? What'd you think of the match? What can you tell us about this one?
Well, you go back and listen to the commentary. Not only that, and they actually make reference to, well, there's an awful lot of kicking and punching in this match, and clotheslines too, because the whole match was essentially guys just kicking, punching, and clotheslining. The match was about 9 minutes too long. But sometimes you scramble and you just have to look at what you have, get your gear on, come up with a match. You guys go over and give me 10 minutes. So I have no idea. It was probably, probably me coming up with the match because the guys were there and saying, right, hey, let's do this. Probably Jerry Briscoe or Pat or somebody putting the match together pretty quick.
So chat me up about, at the time, there's so many gangs in the WWF and there's even gang warfare and gang rules, and you've got the Boricuas and you've got the Truth Commission and you've got the DOA, and there's just so many of these going. Is this something that Vince sort of was fixated on, that he needed gangs? How does that come about?
They're not gangs. They're factions. You need factions. Groups of individuals that come together for a common cause.
Vince felt that during this time, and this was the whole, the Boricua thing, the America versus Canada, that we needed more factions. I think Vince looked at what we had, and there was the individuals per se may not have been as strong as all being together, and felt that if he had a bunch of factions that he could then spin individuals off of, that's what he needed. It didn't work. We had the whole USA versus Canada thing going on that was working, and it worked by accident. It wasn't planned. It happened. It worked by accident. So you have these two factions going against each other, and then now you've got a Puerto Rican faction. Now you've got a biker faction. Now you have a nation faction. Now you have all of these other factions that I just think it was too much.
Right.
I really thought that it was too much, because instead of bringing a guy in, you were bringing people in to see who fit in what faction. Well, we could bring this guy in. He could be a part of this group. Or what if we bring this guy? Well, this guy could lead this group to go over here. Austin was the only individual, Undertaker and Shawn, and Bret, but Bret was part of the Canadian faction.
Well, and Shawn's part of DX.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Austin and Taker, you're only two individuals.
How does the DOA come about? Whose idea is that to push for this sort of biker gang gimmick?
Undertaker had an idea for a biker gang, and Undertaker was friends with Ron and Don Harris, who were Skull and 8-Ball. Plus he was friends with Brian Lee. Brian Lee was a biker anyway. Crush liked bikes, but the Harris boys didn't. They weren't bikers. But they looked like bikers.
Right.
They had the look, and he was trying to do something for his friends and had an idea for them. Vince loves bikes. Vince is a biker. So he thought, well, great. We'll have this faction of bikers. And we got the deal with Titan Motorcycle, and they supplied us with the motorcycles. Worked for a while.
Let's talk about what's next here on the show. We've got a tag team flag match where we've got Bret Hart and the British Bulldog. They're coming out to the ring first. And while they're in the ring, there's a backstage interview with Doc, Vader, and the Patriot. This is an interesting deal here. It looked like Patriot is looking at and talking to the wrong camera. And then Vader says something like, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Ain't that a bunch of bullshit? So these guys go 23 minutes and 13 seconds. And right as the match is about to get started, Jim Ross would announce that they had agreed on new rules for the match. Now it could be pinfall or submission as well as capture the flag. So it's a flag match, but it's not. It's just a regular match too, but
it's about the flag,
and the flags are on poles in opposite corners. And, Meltzer would write, Davey Boy's knee was bothering him, and it was his first match back. Vader suffered a broken nose and hyperextended elbow in the match in Japan with Shamrock, and is basically working this match with one arm. And the Patriot suffered a severe viral infection earlier in the week, severe enough that he collapsed at home due to dehydration and was rushed to the hospital where he had to receive fluids via IV. But he's still doing the match here, which wasn't very good. Although considering the circumstances, based on everything we just laid out, I guess it's about as good as you could imagine. The finish saw Bret pin the Patriot after reversing a rolling reverse cradle and holding the tights. Chat me up. What the hell was wrong with this match?
Okay. Hindsight being 2020, I thought the match wasn't that bad.
Really?
You go back and watch Leon. I thought that Vader has his working shoes on. Leon looked good in the match. Bret looked good in the match. Patriot looked better than he should have, as did Bulldog. They had a good match. God, Vader did the moonsault, almost landed on his feet, meant to land on his feet.
Let's mention that because I think a lot of people lose sight of that. What do you think Vader's weighing here? 390?
Every bit. Yeah. He's probably right at about 400.
So he's doing a backflip from standing on the top rope back into the ring. And he almost nails it and lands on his feet. Like, I can't imagine that that's advisable at all. It feels like that would just shatter your ankle, but somehow Vader manages to do it. Does anybody try to talk him out of that? That does not seem like that's in the book of good ideas.
No, it's something that Leon felt comfortable doing, but I thought that overall the whole match, I thought Vader had his working shoes on and they had a good match. The funny thing about it is as many times as they explained the rules have changed and this is pinfall or submission. Best of my recollection, I think that was a Pat Patterson and Bret Hart audible at the last minute, that because everybody's banged up, how good is a match going to be with all those guys when the object is just to climb a pole and get a flag?
Right.
And Bret felt that if we could have, pinfalls and submissions, it adds to the drama of the match. Pat, obviously feeling the same way, made the pitch and changed the matchup. I think it made for a lot better match than if it was just strictly a capture the flag match.
Whose idea was the capture the flag match to start with?
God, it's probably something Vince and I came up with at some point. I don't know.
What's your favorite capture the flag match?
My favorite capture the flag match would have to be when the finish flag was up against the African flag.
The Patriot misses a drop kick on the British Bulldog early in this match, but Bulldog can't help it and still sells it. Patriot also tries to do a sharpshooter on Bret Hart. Couldn't get it. He's on the top rope at one point and then eventually just dives off with, vigor, and does a header into the ring. I'm not making fun of the Patriot here. I know that he had struggled with his painkiller addiction, and he's told that story a lot, and he's come out the other side, and he has a great story to tell. But him being here, is this just the right place and the right time based on the Bret Hart anti-American angle? What was Vince's reaction to his performance? What did he think about him? Whose idea was it to bring him in? Chat me up about the Patriot, because we haven't spent nearly enough time talking about him here on the show.
I knew Del Wilkes from the global GWF, Global Wrestling Federation in Dallas. And I tried to bring in Del Wilkes when he was a state trooper in the AWA back in 1988, I believe, 88, 89. Wanted to bring him in then. He went on to become the Patriot and do his stuff in global and had a successful career in Japan. So by this time he's had a few years in the business, 10 years, what have you. And I was always a big fan of his. I thought he was a great talent. He could talk and he could work. So when we brought Del in, we had high hopes for him. The timing of the America-Canada angle, that was just great timing. That just happened. Like I said, that was an accident, but he fell right into it. And he was the perfect guy to put in that spot because he was All-American. By God, he was the Patriot.
Right.
At this time, though, he was dealing with injuries. We had the issues, as you say, the dehydration. Who knows what that really was? But Del, the issues and the demons were starting to come out.
Well, I'd like to take a time out right now to share my thoughts on the Patriot. All right, let's get back to our remix for Bad Blood, episode 68 of Something to Wrestle.
When you talk about the screw ups in the match from a performer, it's a little bit of both. You look at it and go, wow, I didn't hit that, or that could have been better. But when you try to remove yourself from trying to critique every little fucking thing, and you look at it as just entertain me right now.
Right.
I love the fact that the Patriot couldn't get the sharpshooter on.
Sure.
That was Bret's finish.
Absolutely.
And he's struggling with it, trying to put the finish on. I love that. I love that, they screw up spots and that it doesn't look perfect, because I hate when things look too perfect.
Yeah. It looks choreographed, scripted.
Yeah. And that comes from Bobby Heenan, don't work like a wrestler, work like a manager,
right,
and vice versa. So I saw the match in completely different eyes, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I enjoyed it. The guys went out there who were injured and who were banged up and made the most of it and told a damn good story in doing it. The end, Bret pulled the tights and the commentators didn't even make note of it, which was kind of a fail on my part. I don't know why. I remember even that night going, Bret's pulling the tights, and nobody would say it. So for whatever reason, I don't think Vince wanted to bring that out.
It's worth mentioning that when I was talking about kind of the missed spots in the match, I wasn't trying to critique the match as much as I was to ask, had the Patriots addiction problems reared their head by this point, and how much of his performance do you believe was based on that?
again, I didn't think his performance was that bad, so I don't know. At this point, it wasn't the addiction problems as much as it was the constant injuries.
Right.
And he seemed to be snake bit with injuries. And we were finding out here that we had basically purchased damaged goods, that he had a shoulder that was messed up when he came to us, and he hadn't had that repaired. And we didn't know that he had all of these issues. So no, and I get it. I'm saying that we as human beings, I think, look at everything and immediately the immediate response is a lot of times is to critique. I know when I watch anything live, I just tear it apart. Oh, they screwed up there. Up, instead of just watching shit.
Well, I guess what I'm so fascinated about the Patriots run here is, you know, he debuts on June 30th, 1997. And this is when the anti-American thing is starting to gain some traction for Bret Hart. 2 weeks after debuting, he's feuding with Bret. And then he's in a world title match in September, the month before at Ground Zero. Here he's with other headliners, again, working with the world champion in a flag match, America versus Canada. And now fast forward just a few months in early 98, he's released. So the dude's in and out in 6 months, but while he's there, what a splash he made.
He did.
Anything else you can give us on the Patriot? I don't know when we'll talk about him again.
No, it was, unfortunately, it was not a great experience during this time. Started out great, and then as we got into it, there were just too many issues, and there were too many problems that we just didn't know, and he needed a lot of work. His knees were gone, his shoulder was gone, and he had substance abuse problems as well. He knew that, and he was putting himself at risk being on the road. You just had to make a break. And sometimes that's just the way that the cookie crumbles. Great guy, and a great talent. Should have been on top for a long time and had a hell of a run. And I always wanted to take the mask off of him as well. I think that the Patriot Del Wilkes without the mask would have been just as good as the guy with the mask, but just didn't happen.
You know, I know we're going to talk about the main event next, but since we've discussed Bret Hart's match here, because this is his last, real match on pay-per-view for the WWF before the Survivor Series, and we all know what happens there. I know we touched on it earlier, but Bret has been the world champion for back-to-back pay-per-views here. He's not in the main event of either one. I don't remember that ever happening when Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin had the belt. Chat me up. Does that affect Bret's money when he's the world champion, but not in the main event on a pay-per-view? Would he have made less on these shows than if he would have been in the main event?
No.
Okay. Let's get to the Hell in a Cell. Before we do that, we should mention that they're doing an interview backstage with Doc Hendricks, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Chyna, and Rick Rude. We've got everybody out there. And Michaels very sarcastically says this match isn't for his coveted European title and that it will stay with him. And he wipes his head. And he's sort of making light of the title, or so it seems, with that comment. And then when Hunter goes to say something, they cut away and do a crowd shot instead. What do you remember of this interview? It feels like there's more to it than what we see here.
What do you mean more to it? I thought that the interview was great. It was exactly what we were building to, and it was to build that rivalry with Bret and Shawn, and for Shawn to be able to go into November talking about the only reason that Bret now is actually in the main event is because he's with Shawn. That was part of the story. That was part of the whole issue. I thought it was excellent. I laughed my ass off through the whole thing, just loving every bit of it.
Whose idea was it to put Undertaker and Shawn together? Obviously, you have a natural story from the SummerSlam angle with Shawn working as the referee and costing Undertaker the title. But are you guys just sitting around one day and say, wow, we've never put them together. What would that look like? And that's it.
Thinking about just great matchups and something new. when you're looking for opponents for The Undertaker, which brings us here. We didn't have a lot of opponents for The Undertaker, and we hadn't done anything with Shawn yet. So it was an opportunity to put those two together. Let's see how they gelled. And holy cow, man, we had magic.
Let's talk a little bit about the backstage situation at the time, because Shawn Michaels, according to the rumor and innuendo, had a lot of heat with the Clique back in the day, but now most of those guys are gone, except Triple H is still here. We know what the backstage relationship was like with Bret and Shawn. Do you know if Shawn had any significant heat with anyone else in the locker room or the office at the time?
At this time, Shawn was kind of keeping to himself with Hunter and doing his own thing. Shawn always had residual heat just for the way that he did things. In particular, like the interview that he did, people took that as a shoot. They took that as Shawn. Oh God, Shawn's just trying to get under Bret's skin as a shoot. They forget that this is entertainment, folks,
right,
and that we're telling a story here. And the fact that we're telling this story on television, shouldn't that tell you that it's a story? This is what we're doing. The problem was Bret took it personal. Bret took it seriously and felt, he's saying those things to get under my skin. Yes, Bret, he is. He's saying those things to get under the Heartbreak Kid, is saying those things to get under the Hitman's skin. It's a story. And all too often people take what is said on television as, oh, well, that's personal and that's real and they're just trying to get to me, when in reality it's all about making money and trying to make a story more interesting. And if the performers in the back believe it and they're selling it, then you know the audience is going to believe it and sell it the same way.
What was the feeling on Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the time? Did he have any heat backstage? Did Vince see him as a player? Did Vince think at this point he was a mid-card guy? What's everybody thinking about Hunter Hearst Helmsley at this point?
I think for the most part, he had kind of come out of the doghouse since the whole whatever incident that they did
Curtain call
in the Garden. He was out of the doghouse and he was coming into his own, and Vince felt that if he was going to get over, he was going to get over with Shawn. So there were high hopes for him. There were people, Jim Cornette in particular, that felt that Hunter was a mid-card guy at best, but he was having the matches that he had with Cactus Jack. He was tearing the houses down and he was showing that, hey, I can go. And I think Hunter was trying to get out of Shawn's shadow a little bit, but he also knew that he needed Shawn to get in the spotlight.
Right.
So they complemented each other, and we were hoping that, man, we've got another star out of this thing.
Let's get to the match. They say the winner of this match will go on to Survivor Series to face the WWF champion. Shawn Michaels is out first, and in tow are Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Chyna, and Rick Rude. Then the Undertaker comes out, and Taker dominates the early part of the match. And a few minutes into it, Shawn was yelling at Vince, and Vince said something like, "Everything is my fault these days." Just kind of an interesting comment, because we all know what's going on behind the scenes. Meltzer's pretty high on the match. It goes 29 minutes and 59 seconds. And he called it an absolute classic, must-see, probably 5-star match. Michaels did everything, and then even more than everything. What did you think of the match? I know we're going to break down some of the different spots, but watching this for the first time in a long time, does this still hold up as much as you imagined?
10,000 stars.
I mean, it's really hard to argue. This is one of the best matches in company history. I mean, and probably one of the best matches I've ever seen.
You know, it's you and I talked. You and I were talking about something else when I was watching this match, and I said to you, "God, Undertaker hadn't." When I was at the point, Undertaker hadn't even made his entrance yet, and I said, "God, Shawn Michaels is so good." This match from start to finish, from the entrances, Shawn made everything mean something. From the time that he asked Hunter and Chyna and Rick Rude to get out of the ring so the cage could come down, to Shawn selling the cage coming down, to Undertaker getting in the ring, and the methodical way that Undertaker stalked Shawn. And they did not rush anything. It was all just methodical. There was no wasted movement. There was no wasted BS just to do something to do it. Every single movement in that match by every participant meant something and was pulled off to a T. The simple just psychology of Undertaker not having to rush. Shawn had nowhere to go. He's locked inside of a cell. And Taker not rushing and stalking him, walking slowly, just, slowly he walked. And then Shawn trying to flee, and then Shawn selling on his face. Oh my God, I've got nowhere to go. What the hell am I going to do? Do I climb up the cage? Oh shit, there's a top up there. It was put together to sell every single element of that. We even sold, the early bump with the cameraman in Shawn's face. So now there's cameramen inside the cell.
Right.
And that Shawn's already frustrated with them. My God, he said, get out of my fucking face. Ooh, we weren't supposed to hear that.
Right.
That's Shawn being an asshole because, he's really a dick in real life. He does those things just to piss Vince off. And then, later on, it was when the cameraman got taken out. It was, ooh. The lines of reality were blurred so much that everybody sat there and went, is it real? Is it not? Is it entertainment? And it was real entertainment.
Some of the spots in this that really are just something to see. Undertaker throws Shawn over the top rope to the floor, and Shawn lands on his hip on the outside. That's not something anybody should ever do. They do a powerbomb spot on the outside of the ring, and Shawn, to sort of counteract it, holds the cage and starts punching the Undertaker. But then the Undertaker manages to tear the grip loose and then sort of slam him into the cage. They do the pile driver onto the steps, with Shawn delivering the pile driver onto the steps. When they finally get out of the ring, before they do the table spot, or of course everybody remembers, they go to the top of the cage, and then he's throwing Shawn off of the side, and then Shawn, kind of standing on the side of the cage, has his hand stomped, and then he does what is at that time probably the most spectacular bump in the company's history, right, Bruce?
Absolutely. And you go back even before that. You go to the bump with the cameraman, and Shawn, beating the hell out of the cameraman. So we've got to get people, we've got to now unlock the cage to get people in to get the cameraman out, which this is Shawn's opportunity to get the hell out of the cage. He can escape. He sees an opening. He gets out. Taker chases him down. Shawn does a drop kick on concrete to the Undertaker. And, that gets missed. And then he goes for the second drop kick, and Taker catches him. And that's where Shawn takes the bump into the cage, to where he comes back up all bloodied and just bleeding like a stuck pig. The climb up the cage, the way that Undertaker had his foot, it just was so masterfully done. It wasn't a spot fest. And then Taker climbing up that damn cage looked like a cat going up the cage. And again, they didn't have to rush. They got on top of the cage and took their time. And the shots from Krista Fury was the cameraman, the handheld cameraman that was in the ring with his camera pointing up through the top of the cage, and you see the blood dripping down from Shawn's face onto the camera. And you can even hear the cameraman say, "Oh shit," when the blood hits. It was all those little nuances. And then, as you just lay it out, the bump. Shawn taking the bump off the side of the cage through the table was spectacular. And Taker didn't rush it. Shawn didn't rush it. They went through, took another bump on the table, and then now time to get back in. Now you're going to, now we're going home. Now you're going to die.
All right, timeout. Listen, I know when people talk about Hell in a Cell, they always talk about the Mick Foley bump, and I get that. My goodness, what a spectacle that was. But this bump from Shawn off the side of the cage onto the table is one of the most spectacular bumps of all time here in October of 97. Now, of course, we know by June of 98, nobody's even thinking about this one again, but it does feel like Shawn set a precedent, and then somehow Mick Foley just knocked that door down in a way that we hope nobody ever does again, but they've done it to diminishing returns ever since. It never meant more than when Mick Foley did it, but Shawn did it first. And I'm not saying that Foley didn't turn the volume up. Lord knows he did, in a way that probably in hindsight, maybe we shouldn't have, but still, what a spectacular performance this was from Shawn Michaels, and a gutsy bump. And I know now that one doesn't look like it's nearly as dangerous as the Mick Foley thing, but at the time, my goodness, what a spectacle. Shawn had it all, man. I think you could make the argument that from late 97 until early 98, nobody ever had the run that Shawn Michaels did. His matches were incredible. His swagger was off the charts. He was just feeling it, man. He was to me, that is peak Shawn Michaels. The promos, the in-ring performance, just the way he carried himself. He was sold on the fact that he was the main event. He was the showstopper, and he certainly was on this night, man. What a performance. Let's get back to it.
And then the coup de grace, the finish.
Before you get there, the slingshot from the outside into the cage where Shawn gets color, is that one of the best moments for that? I don't know. I know you get weird when I talk about it, but Shawn got so much blood here, and the visual of him just covered in blood, thrown from one end of the arena to the other in every possible way, against the cage, on top of the cage, off the cage. And the way he does it on the way up, to where as soon as he hits the cage, I mean, Shawn's one of the greatest, if not the greatest wrestler of all time. And this match proves it, does it not?
Wholeheartedly. And you look at little things like that explain it all. And I dare say, even for a cage match, hey, I loved it. And I'm an old school guy that loved a lot of blood and everything. It was a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Maybe too much, but at the same time, for that match, for the first Hell in a Cell, it set the tone, and it set the bar extremely high for anybody to try and follow that.
Well, let's talk about, before we get to what we're going to go to, I guess, there's lots of rumor and innuendo about who the cameraman was. Do you recall who the cameraman was in this match?
I think it was just a local guy.
Yeah. He's an independent worker. And then whose idea was the Hell in a Cell? You kept saying it's not a cage match, it's a Hell in a Cell when we first started recording here, which is obviously a Vince McMahon ism, where he doesn't want to call it a cage. He wants to call it a Hell in a Cell. Was he the guy who originally named it?
I believe it was Vince's name, Vince McMahon's name to come up, because it had to do with the Undertaker, and you wanted to make the structure ominous, dark and ominous. So I believe, I'm almost 99% sure it was Vince McMahon who came up with the Hell in a Cell. They wanted to make it different. They wanted to be able to make it so that they could work on the outside of the ring, but still have nowhere to go. And a cage match can be so restrictive because all you've got is the inside of the ring to work. But then as they got there, it was Pat Patterson who was like, wow, I don't know why we got to get out of the cage. Why can't we get out of this? Because it's a fucking cage. It's a hell in a cell. We're talking about this monstrous structure that there's only one way in and one way out, and you can't escape the thing once you're locked in. But Shawn had this idea of taking this damn bump. You had to get out of the cage to do it. And Pat came up with what if somebody gets hurt inside? We must get them out. And when the door is open, the silly little bastard, he sees that, and bang, and I'm out. And fuck you, Undertaker. But then he comes, he's got nowhere to go. He climbs up to the top. And Undertaker, boom, off the cage. So it was Shawn wanting to take the bump and Shawn wanting to do more. And he wanted to do it all around the structure of the cage. So as much as I hated it, I loved it. I loved the execution of it.
So let's talk about it. Finally, they're both in the cage. And after the ref bump, the Undertaker uses a choke slam off the middle rope and a hard chair shot to the top of the head. And the lights go out. And Paul Bearer comes out. And can you recreate the call that Vince McMahon has here?
Probably not, because I hated it. That must be. Oh my! It's gotta be Kane. That's gotta be Kane. Well, it's gotta be Kane.
Why didn't you like that?
What's that?
Why didn't you like that?
First of all, I wanted silence. I wanted, who is that? And then I just wanted the theater of the mind. Yeah, it's got to be Kane. But how do you know that? I mean, I didn't want it to be Kane until Undertaker and Kane had that look in the ring.
Right.
And Kane did the puppy dog tilt and Taker did the Kane and then say, oh my God, I think he just said, that's got you. And then do it. I wanted the anticipation to last that entire time from the music, the blackout in the music, until the face off in the ring, to where it's Undertaker who is the first one to say, to look in his eyes and go, Kane. And the commentators to say, oh my God, that's Kane. So I think Vince just, felt it at the time and felt it needed more, and it needed to people to know that was Kane. I think everybody knew it was Kane.
Right.
I just didn't think he needed to say it as many times as they said it before he got to the ring.
I don't know why, but it tickles me that gets you fired up.
It does. Well, it's storytelling, and it's what they do now.
Right.
As you notice now, a lot of times they do stay silent, and they do let the story just develop in front of your very eyes. And the feeling was that the revelation and the unveiling was when Undertaker looks in his brother's eyes and realizes he's alive.
All right, timeout. How great is it to hear how excited and engaged Bruce is to talk about this? I mean, it almost sounds like he's talking about his kids here. He's so excited to talk about Kane's debut here, and especially the way the Undertaker responds. I mean, his facials here and his reaction to Kane's debut makes Kane a bona fide superstar right away. This is just a fun episode to revisit because of Bruce's involvement. Let's keep it going.
Let's talk about the end of the match here, and then we'll go back and kind of set the stage for Kane. So Kane, of course, here uses a tombstone on the Undertaker, which allows Shawn to score the pin. And there's rumor and innuendo that, and you can, I guess, see it when it happens, as Kane picks up the Undertaker with the tombstone, maybe his mask moved and he couldn't really see exactly where he was. He's supposed to be giving this tombstone towards the hard camera, but he pivots a few times trying to find it before delivering it. Do you know exactly what happened?
Well, no, he got him up, and when he got him up, they were facing a profile on the hard cameras. He just had to turn to get to the hard camera. When he picked him up, instead of picking him up and having him set on the hard camera, he picked him up and got him set, and then realized he needed to turn to the hard camera.
Let's talk a little bit about, obviously, Shawn gets the win here with Kane delivering this tombstone pile driver. Shawn throws the arm over. The ref makes a very slow 1, 2, 3, and the bloody, beaten, and battered Shawn Michaels has somehow come out victorious, and now he's not only the European champion, but he's heading to Survivor Series to challenge for the world title. Lots of stuff going on here. The blood dropping on the camera through the cage, the cameraman spot, ripping the door off, the Undertaker. Obviously, this isn't the last match between the Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. As you may recall, that following January, they would have a casket match at the Royal Rumble, and that's where Shawn would really ultimately injure his back and wind up causing a big pause in his wrestling career. And I think most of us remember the two classic WrestleMania matches they had at WrestleMania 25 and 26, most of which people call the match at 25 one of the greatest wrestling matches of all time. So if for whatever reason you've never seen this, I can't encourage you enough. Go out of your way to watch this Hell in a Cell match from Bad Blood. One of the best matches, if not the best match from 1997, and a favorite of mine. Still, after all these years, my favorite Hell in a Cell match. As a reminder, the month before at Ground Zero is when we first saw Undertaker do the tope, the dive over the top rope. And now here we are at Hell in a Cell. So these guys keep turning the volume up every single time they wrestle. And this match was masterful. Nothing that Bruce and I say to put it over here is strong enough. Go watch it if you haven't already. Let's talk a little bit about the genesis, though, of the Hell in a Cell cage, the actual design. Cornette has gone on record as saying that he was always a big fan of one of the cage concepts they did down in Memphis. So down there, they had a big cage that would go not just on the ring, but around the ring, which would allow, you could go under the ring. People could come out from under the ring. You could drag weapons out. And he also liked the War Games cage because it had a top on it. And obviously that's pretty popular because War Games is coming back after all these years to the NXT TakeOver before Survivor Series. So it was his idea, according to Cornette, to combine the two. And he liked this as a way to debut Kane, because they had done something similar to this in Knoxville years prior to this, when Doug Furness, who was a strongman, came down to the ring and ripped the door off a cage to make the save. So Cornette is suggesting here that Kane should debut by ripping the door off to really get his power and strength over, and then go ahead and have a face-to-face with the Undertaker and tombstone him. How do you remember the actual mechanics of the debut here? We're going to do a Hell in a Cell, and the Hell in a Cell is really to debut Kane. Is that the idea?
It was where we were going to debut Kane. It was a way to get or Shawn over Undertaker without Shawn just having to beat the Undertaker. And it was a way to debut this new character and this new foe for the Undertaker.
I guess
it was perfect.
My point is, though, the actual concept of a match, the actual Hell in a Cell, was designed so Kane could rip the door off the cage. Like, here's this new monstrous thing that the WWE has constructed, and this new debuting powerhouse can destroy it too.
No, it just happened that way. It happened that the Hell in a Cell, and then how do you get Kane involved? And it's, well, he can rip the damn door off. And Jim Cornette was a part of the whole thing with the Hell in a Cell and the creation of the cage itself and the match and the whole 9 yards. And Jimmy, without a doubt, 100% involved in that. And a lot of that was his idea. I don't remember the furnace thing at all. You can go back, hell, if you wanted to. What was the name of the guy that WCW had go down and get the cage? RoboCop.
RoboCop, yeah.
Yeah, no, we ripped it off from RoboCop. No, just kidding, folks.
I need
We didn't.
I need that to be the thing that RoboCop was the original Kane. That Kane is a RoboCop ripoff. That's hilarious.
100%. Yes, I'm
he's
a big RoboCop fan.
He's a big guy. He's slow and prodding. He had lifts in his shoes. He had a half mask. He didn't sell much of shit.
And he bends steel.
He's bending steel. He's running for mayor. RoboCop's running for mayor.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding. So let's talk about that. So Hell in a Cell is an idea that had, freestyle, when you think you guys first start talking about the concept of Hell in a Cell, is this something that has been talked about for years, or a month out, 6 weeks out?
No, probably 2 months out when we're getting to the first Shawn Undertaker match and then the return. What do you do for a return? Is it a cage match? Do we do, what is there to do something different? And the different incarnations of the cage is what came up, and the evolution of Hell in a Cell.
Seems kind of silly, but is somebody sitting around drawing a sketch of this cage?
No.
So
probably Kevin Dunn's people when they had it built.
So are you who's describing this cage to whom when it's going into production?
I believe, and I'm trying to think, this is a living room conversation, and I want to say that we had it on speakerphone with Vince McMahon, Cornette, myself, I believe Russo was there too, and Vince explaining to Kevin, because at that time, Kevin or Steve Taylor, maybe, exactly what he wanted. And this is what we need constructed. It's got to go all the way around the mats on the outside of the ring, and it has a top, and I want it to be huge. At that time, it was so damn high. We never thought of anybody taking a bump off the damn thing.
Right.
The original concept was to keep people in, not nobody getting on top of the thing and doing these crazy bumps. So, as we got closer to it and everything, and we knew that was where Kane was going to debut, and as time went on, it became that. But no, it was the Hell in a Cell was not designed for something for Kane to destroy at all. It actually became a problem as to how do you get now Kane involved in this damn thing? It's like, well, he's a monster. He can rip the door off the damn cage. What people didn't see, and what was supposed to happen as well, was when you look back on when you watch it and you realize how important concussions are now. And especially with Kane, we added the big bang concussions when his flames would go off. But originally, when the music started and we got into the thing and Kane blew through the entryway there, if there had been a concussion, we had the entire, there were cage, like cyclone fence, cage netting on the entrance. And we had this fire gel on that. And the stuff was supposed to burn right when he came out. It's supposed to go up in flames and stay on fire for the whole rest of the time. And that didn't work. We got like a little poof, and then it just kind of fizzled out. And then when Kane got in the ring and did the big gesture for the fire on the 4 corner posts, it's just so anticlimactic watching it today versus how it became with the big concussions and the big response and everything. I think it would have been a lot better if we had that, hindsight being 2020. But a
lot of people listening, when you say concussion, will think that you're talking about CTE. Tell them what you mean.
Well, a big boom. So when he makes the gesture for the fire and the fire goes off, you're a boom. That's a concussion. And the idea behind when Kane first came out from the entryway was to have a big boom and have the entire entryway be set on fire and continue to burn throughout the time until Kane made his exit. It burned a little bit, but not nearly like we wanted it to. Dealing with fire could always be tricky.
Let's talk about Kane. Cornette has said that Dutch Mantel, who a lot of fans today probably remember as Zeb Coulter, had Glenn Jacobs down in Puerto Rico, and he called Cornette back when Cornette was running Smoky Mountain and asked Jim if he would book Glenn. So Glenn goes to Smoky Mountain. Cornette names him Unabomb, and he starts teaming with Eddie Gilbert and Al Snow there in Smoky Mountain, and they win the tag titles as the Dynamic Duo, not dudes. And they're using the name Doomsday. He would also win the USWA World title. He also wrestled one match, I believe, on TV for WCW in '93 against Sting. It was an enhancement match, so Sting goes over. When do you first remember hearing about Glenn? Was it when he was down in Smoky Mountain? And what was the company's opinion on him at the time?
No, Glenn, first time we ever heard of Glenn was the Survivor Series in Boston, where we had all the masked men for Lawler, when Lawler had his issues.
93.
Jerry Jarrett recommended Glenn Jacobs to be one of the masked guys. And I don't believe that we used Glenn at that time, but he came down, big bastard. Then we did the Isaac Yankem stuff with him.
Yeah. So
and sent him away to go away. So at this point in time, he had been to Puerto Rico. He had worked a while down there, and now he's working in Smoky Mountain. And Cornette had said that he was doing really well in Smoky Mountain, and we had seen the tapes.
So summer of '95, you guys bring him up and make him an evil dentist, Dr. Isaac Yankem. And bear with me here, because I don't know when we'll talk about this again. The rumor and innuendo is that Vince had a dentist appointment that didn't go that well, and he decided that nobody likes going to the dentist, and this would make a great gimmick. So he creates Dr. Isaac Yankem. Who the hell booked this gimmick, and how snake bit was this shit from the word go?
Well, first of all, it was Bobby Heenan's idea. And Bobby always had this, whenever somebody go to the dentist, he would go, I'm going to see old Dr. I Yankem, huh? You're going to see Dr. Yankem, Dr. I Yankem. So it was a Bobby Heenan thing. And we were talking about different professions that people hate. And Bobby said, make him a dentist. But he's got to be a dentist with really nasty teeth. And his teeth are all crooked and black. And that's a Weasel creation that we went with.
Well, he got a big push right away, probably because he's a big old dude. And he wrestles Bret Hart at SummerSlam 95. Of course, the gimmick doesn't last very long. And he's gone not too much longer after that. The next time we see him, though, is September of 96. He debuts as Diesel. Of course, he's the fake Diesel, and there's a fake Razor with Rick Bogner. We've talked about that here before on the show. But whose idea was it when you guys were looking for, hey, we own the characters, let's just, make a new Diesel, new Razor? Who suggests Glenn Jacobs for that role?
I did, because we had used Glenn Jacobs in the casket for when Diesel was working with Undertaker. We used Glenn, we dressed him up like Diesel and put him in the casket for the live house. For television, we shot Diesel in the casket. So on TV, when you saw it, it was actually Diesel. But for the live house, we had Glenn Jacobs, and that just made us immediately go back to Glenn Jacobs.
Of course, in May of 97, Paul Bearer would come on Raw and start threatening The Undertaker that he was going to tell the world his biggest secret. And after a few weeks of this, Bearer told Taker that his younger brother was alive and coming to the WWF. So let's backtrack. When did you guys first have the idea, hey, The Undertaker has a brother? Did you know that the first time Paul Bearer came out and said, I'm going to tell the world your biggest secret? Did you already have the idea that you were going to create a brother? Or at that point?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Carry us through how that goes down.
Finding opponents for The Undertaker is not the easiest task in the world. So you have to either create other Undertakers. You have to sometimes create opponents for him. He's a unique character, and it's tough to make someone believably competitive with The Undertaker. So as we were looking for different talent and different people to come in and who's going to work with who, and you're trying to lay out your year, your next 6 months, and you go, God, he's beating everybody. This is not a credible opponent. That's not a credible opponent. We need to create something for him. And I just started freestyling. There you go. You like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what if The Undertaker had a brother? And as I'm going through this whole thing, and I'm literally just thinking out loud, what if The Undertaker had a brother that he thought was dead, but in reality, he lived, and he's been living away from The Undertaker, and he's hated The Undertaker his entire life. And we go back and we tell the story that The Undertaker, when he first came in, went by the name Kane the Undertaker, in memory and as a memorial to his brother Kane, who he thought had died as a small child. And I'm like, and if there was some way that Undertaker thought that he was responsible for the death of his younger brother.
When are you freestyling all this? What month and year?
Probably right before we came up with the whole, whenever Paul Bearer came out. It was probably sometime after WrestleMania.
Okay. So April, May.
May.
Okay.
Yeah. And I start going on, and then, and I start just going, what if there was a fire? What if there was a fire and Undertaker's parents died in the fire, and they told him that his brother died in the fire, but his brother was so disfigured. He got burned and mangled, and he was so disfigured that they thought he would die. But Paul Bearer, who was actually the mortician at the funeral home that his parents ran, actually raised his younger brother this entire time and kept him away from the Undertaker, and told Undertaker that his younger brother was dead when he really was alive. And Paul Bearer, on the other side, this evil, sick bastard, was raising his younger brother to hate his older brother, the Undertaker. And now it's time for revenge. And now his baby brother wants to finally face his older brother in the ring, and the only thing that the Undertaker has ever been successful in, and they finally will collide. And we came up with so much, just sick, funny stuff. That's how we got to the Paul Bearer being Kane's dad. Oh, yes, I was really doing the nasty with your mama, Undertaker. And Kane is mine. We just, we got out there with it. But I went off, and when I say I went off probably for a good 30, 40 minutes on just creating this story with what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
And he's burned and he's mangled, and we put him in a mask because the idea was, we were thinking about things to do with Glenn Jacobs, and he was the Unabomber, but I knew that Vince hated that hockey mask look. But I'm thinking we can put him in a mask, and we can cover his body up enough so that it's not Isaac Yankem. You had to cover up Isaac Yankem. So then we decided, well, his face would be disfigured. He has no voice. He can't talk from the fire. All these horrible things that had happened to him in this fire as a child. And this entire time, Undertaker has thought that his baby brother died in a fire that he thought he set, that killed his parents and his brother. And then later on, we came up with the scenario that it was actually Paul Bearer who set the funeral home on fire. And it just went on from there. But Kane was something to bring to life the original idea behind The Undertaker of Kane, the Undertaker, the first man to ever commit murder. And someone so evil as to be the Undertaker's brother that could actually give him a run for his money that people would believe.
All right, timeout. You know, one of the things we talk about a lot, especially when we talk about characters like these, The Undertaker and Kane, is what if someone else played that character? Like, can you imagine for a moment if instead of putting the Undertaker character on Mark Calloway, what if they put it on Dan Spivey? I love Dan Spivey, and I thought his whole Waylon Mercy thing had legs, maybe better legs than he did at the time. Anyway, I don't think the Undertaker character works with anyone other than Mark Calloway. And people talk about that a lot, but let's talk about Kane for a minute. Can you imagine anyone else playing Kane? I don't know that it would have worked. If Sid Vicious was Kane, would we have cared? Well, certainly we know his career wouldn't have lasted as long. A lot of softball over a 20-year period. I don't think it could have been anyone else. If they tried to put that character on Brian Lee or Duke the Dumpster Drosé, come on, there's no chance, absolutely no chance that this Kane character is so successful. I think it's a testament to who Glenn Jacobs is and a testament to his patience. Let's not forget, this guy was once dressed up like a fucking Christmas tree and an evil dentist and Diesel, not Kevin Nash. There was a lot of terrible stuff that he had to get through to finally hit it big with Kane. And I'm really glad that Kane has finally got his rightful spot in the sun, the spotlight, if you will, for this year's WWE Hall of Fame, which is really the impetus for us doing this remix. Let's get back to it.
Who drew the original, like, artwork or design for what the Kane character would look like?
The creative services, I believe Debbie Bonanzio was the one, but I know she was in charge of creative services at the time. They're the ones that came up with the first concept of Kane. And then it was Terry, God, I can't think of Terry's last name, Terry the seamstress, who did the mask.
Redheaded Stitch is, I think her name on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah. And she's the one that had a leather worker, and Terry was big into the Renaissance Festival and all that medieval stuff.
Yeah.
And so she had somebody that did a lot of that type of work. And she's the one that came up with the whole outfit and the mask, the first mask and everything.
Let's talk about the look. I imagine you guys wanted him to be eye to eye with Undertaker, and that's the reason he's got some lifts going on.
Well, they both have lifts. I mean, he was bigger than Undertaker, I think.
There's a famous shot out there that people have asked questions about for a long time, where the Undertaker's working a house show. I believe it's in Madison Square Garden, and he's sporting a cape. In the original drawings and incarnation of Kane, was he supposed to be wearing a cape, and why did that get switched up? Why didn't we see that?
Kane did wear a cape for a long time. He wore a cape to the ring for a while.
Well, I know he was wearing it on a lot of house shows. I don't remember seeing it on TV. I could be wrong on that, though.
Yeah, he did.
Did you imagine that there was going to be a long-term plan for Kane, or was the idea always that this is going to be something that's going to get us a few pay-per-views?
Honestly, we didn't know what we had. And we thought, okay, if this can get us maybe to WrestleMania and have the blow off at WrestleMania, great. This will be a winner. The fear was, what do you do with Kane after Undertaker? And we thought, well, you know what? We can send him away and bring him back as something else. Kane has gone on to be one of the longest running characters in WWF, WWE history.
Yeah. I mean, as we're doing this, if you're listening on Friday, he's been in the company with this character for 20 years and 1 day at this point. And he made a splash right away. Of course, he's interfering in the main event, the very first ever Hell in a Cell. And he's feuding with the Undertaker, and they would do lots of silly gimmick matches, Inferno matches and such that I'm sure we'll cover in the future. But I think a lot of people overlooked that just 8 or 9 months after he debuted with this character, this is his third time in, he did the evil dentist, he did the fake Diesel, and now in this third gimmick, 8 or 9 months in, He beat Stone Cold Steve Austin on pay-per-view to become the world champion. I think a lot of people overlooked that happened very quickly for him. So it's great that it was a huge success. And Cornette has said that if Glenn didn't work out here and the Kane gimmick didn't work, he was going to be fired. Do you recall that being the case, that there was a lot of pressure on Cornette for this to work?
Not on Cornette, no.
Okay. Let's talk about ripping the cage door off. How do you guys gimmick the cage door like that in the middle of a match with all the fans watching?
It was gimmicked from day one. It was gimmicked when it was hanging up.
So, but tell us how that happens. You guys have some sort of thin little piece of wood in there, just barely holding it in place, that as soon as you put any force to it, it breaks away?
Yeah, that's why, as you notice, Sarge and everybody was down there every time they opened it, being very careful how they opened and closed that door to make sure that it stayed on its hinges and make sure that, but it was just strong, almost like balsa wood that was in the hinges, so that when you applied pressure to it and you pulled it a certain way, if you pushed it the other way, it wouldn't have broken. But if you pull it to you, it would break.
You talked a little bit earlier about Kane's voice. And of course you guys went through, and we're going to do lots of Kane episodes, I'm sure, but you talked a little bit about, he couldn't talk. Was the idea to have him managed by Paul Bearer for a long time, to be the mouthpiece, and then ultimately, whose idea was it to have the little voice box gimmick? Did you guys know that right up front before you ever debuted him, or did that just sort of?
Oh my God, no,
happen?
no,
Okay.
God, no. The voice box didn't come till years later, when Vince wanted to hear from Kane, and I had just been at a, oh my God, I'm blank. A polling. I was voting, and there was a gentleman there who had the voice box, and I couldn't understand anything that he said. Don't ask me why. And I said, what if he had a voice box? Is it one of those gimmicks that he holds to his throat, like the people with throat cancer have? I said, there was just this guy out there. And I said, once I tuned into him and I could, get into it, you can understand what they're saying. And I love it. But that didn't come for years.
Right. You've told us
too
once.
one-dimensional. We got to hear from him.
Let's talk about the mask, because Kane's had several versions of this mask over the years. I mean, he even had a metal one there for a little while, but lots of different incarnations of the mask. And of course, eventually he unmasks, and people would see that there was hair attached to it. And I think a lot of people for years thought that was all Kane's real hair. And at different times, there was more of his hair there than at other times. But chat me up about the different masks. When did you guys first see the mask? How many incarnations did you go through before Vince said, that's it? What do you recall about that?
We probably saw the first mask sometime in September, what have you. We liked them, but the mask just naturally evolved as he would get new ones and they would start to wear, and with the sweat and the smell would get to be kind of brutal, and he would just change up the design a little bit. But that was something that Glenn started to do. And as time went on, they just, changed up. There was never hair in the masks, ever, until that one night in the garden. That was always all Glenn's hair.
At different points, Kane wore like contacts and stuff too.
Yep.
Was that the plan from the very beginning, or when do you remember that becoming a thing?
Well, one eye was only one eye,
right?
Because the one eye was damaged in the fire. Can't make this shit up.
I love that you said it so matter of factly, like, yeah, you dumbass. I mean, it was only the one eye. I mean,
yeah, the one that was damaged in the fire. Damn it.
Yeah. Oh, when did you guys first see the mask and give the green light on? Okay, this is what we want. We're in October.
Well, we saw the drawings, and we went through several of the different drawings, and just picked that one. We liked the red and black because it looked very demonic, and it just represented, red. It was evil, red and black. It looked evil, and went with it. So we probably had the whole outfit. We probably had everything for him in September before that pay-per-view.
I'm sure we're going to cover, the first years of Kane very soon. Anything else you want to mention here before we move along from Kane? Because, what a debut, and I don't know that everybody listening knows this, but you have a couple of twin children, one boy, one girl. Your boy's name is?
Kane.
I mean, Kane is one of your proudest creations in the history of the wrestling business. Is that fair to say?
Without a doubt. And I still go back to, I wish Undertaker would have kept the name Kane, but I think it's cool the way that it evolved and the way that we finally got it out there, and that it still lives on as one of the longest WWF characters in its history. And as a matter of fact, my son's first baby pictures have the mask, wearing the mask.
Can you tweet out some pictures of whatever you have of your family and Kane, or the early mask? Because I know you have an old Kane mask laying around the house somewhere, right?
Yes, I have the original sitting over there on my shelf.
Well, we asked you to tweet something out last week and you didn't. Can you do it this time, you think?
Maybe.
The show Bad Blood here gets 240,000 buys. The main event, which is still something that we can't sell enough for you, is the only 5-star match that Meltzer would award the WWE until 2011 for Cena and Punk that summer in Money in the Bank. So there's a 14-year run here in the World Wrestling Federation before another match gets 5 stars. And I know you kind of think star ratings are silly, but it doesn't get much better than this main event here, does it, Bruce?
No, it doesn't. And I do think that they're silly, but I do think that this is one of the greatest matches of all time.
The very next night on Raw, we should mention, is when we see the Hart Foundation doing an interview in the ring, and on the big wall, the Titantron, the video screen, is where we see a group of guys who start referring to themselves as D-Generation X. Rick Rude, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and China are there, and they start to refer to themselves as that. And of course, we see Kane make his Raw debut, and he destroys Flash Funk and leaves. So it's an interesting time in the business. 1997 is one of my very favorite years in the business, and it's because of a show like this that maybe a lot of people have slept on or kind of forgotten, because it wasn't a SummerSlam, it wasn't a WrestleMania, it wasn't a Royal Rumble, but this little In Your House show was freaking awesome. I loved it. Anything else you want to mention about Bad Blood before we get to some fan questions here, Bruce?
No, it's just when you go back and watch it, you will realize that it is the beginning of the next era in the professional wrestling business or sports entertainment business, whatever the hell you want to call it, because there were so many launching pads for so many people and so many storylines that would change the course of the wrestling business as we knew it.
Let's run through some questions on Facebook. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go like us on Facebook for 2 reasons. 1, because you're going to get to interact with us, ask questions about the show. 2, you never know when Bruce is going to pop up and do Facebook Live. He did it this week during Raw. When's he going to do it next week? Well, if you liked us on Facebook, you'd get a heads up. When Bruce goes on, he talks and takes your fan questions for about an hour. So if there's something you've been wanting to know and we're just not covering it for whatever reason, it hasn't been on a poll, it's not timely, whatever the case may be, you can ask Bruce yourself and get him to answer you personally just by liking us on Facebook. And that's simple to do. It's facebook.com/something to wrestle. We're going to run through some fan questions now, but we could be asking your question next week. I also want to encourage you to continue to push the like campaign. Tell your friends, everybody you know who digs wrestling, go like this page, because when we get to 30,000 likes, we're going to cover SummerSlam 1991 in long form. Everything that you always wanted to know about that show will be covered there. We're going to do it the exact same way for Survivor Series 1991 and Tuesday in Texas and the Royal Rumble. How do you get those? Well, it's simple. We need 40,000 likes to get Survivor Series, and for 50,000 likes, man, this is awesome. Tuesday in Texas and Royal Rumble 92. What all happens during these shows? Well, it's easy. Ric Flair wins the world title. A snake bites the Macho Man. Hulk Hogan loses the title to The Undertaker. The Undertaker wins it back. Ultimate Warrior is holding up Vince McMahon for money at the main event of SummerSlam 91. There's just so much stuff to cover on these shows. And we want to give you all the insight that Bruce has from being there before those shows, after those shows, and you'll watch them along with us, almost like pop-up video. It's going to be a great time. Cruise on over, throw us a like. It's free, guys. Even if you don't like Facebook, like our page. It's facebook.com/something to wrestle. Bruce, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's fire off some questions here from Facebook. Let's get right to it. Was there any talk of canceling the show due to Brian Pillman's death?
No. The show must go on, and it was unfortunate. The show must go on.
Was this always intended to be Vince's last show as an announcer?
No, it wasn't something that we planned. There was always the intention for Vince to move away from the play-by-play and for Jim Ross to move into that spot. Best of my recollection, I don't know that it was definitive. This is the last one. I think it just worked out that way.
Why didn't Kane wear the cape this night?
Because he was going into the ring in physicality and didn't want to have to worry about taking it off when he got into the ring with Undertaker.
What was the plan for Brian Pillman after Bad Blood?
The plan that night, I believe, was for Goldust to go over and win Marlena back, and then we were going to reset.
I think he was doing something with Dude Love that night. Anyway.
Who? Brian?
Yeah.
I thought it was with Goldust, but he had Marlena with him. The idea was to get Marlena away from him, but
how much, hypothetically, would you guess that the cage cost the Hell in a Cell to make?
I have no idea. I don't know how much probably $10,000-$15,000 easily.
What did Undertaker and Shawn feel about working with the Hell in a Cell structure?
At first they felt that it was confining, believe it or not. But once they got there and they came up with the ways to get out of it and different things, I think overall that they really liked it. They liked the new challenges, I guess, if you will. But it was interesting that at first they thought it was confining.
What did you think of the Bad Blood promotional poster? I don't know if you remember this, but it's got the Undertaker holding his own head.
I thought it was fine. I never understood it. I don't know why he's holding his own severed head. I always thought, I was like, well, why isn't he holding Shawn's head?
Who did those? Do you recall?
The creative services people and marketing would get together and come up with a concept for each one. Marketing would go with the names and the concepts of the pay-per-views, and then creative services would send in their ideas. Vince would ultimately choose.
Who came up with the idea to put 2 Ds in Bad Blood?
Everything's better with double D's.
How would Jim Cornette describe that?
Double D's, double nipples, double titties, motherfucker.
I don't know why that's not exactly what I expected, but roll tide on that. Jordan wants to know, there's rumor and innuendo that when Kane teamed with X-Pac years later, Kane at a couple of house shows wore green and black instead of red and black. Do you recall there being some sort of green version of this Kane outfit when he was teaming with X-Pac?
That would be a rumor and innuendo that would not be true.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that. Where did Kane get his mask?
We talked about that. It was made for him.
This is where you say masks are us.
Oh, damn. Mask are us.
I love you. Forgot.
I get into the literal translation
Right.
sometimes, and I just get all screwed up with it. You're doing a show here, Bruce. Entertain me now. Where does Kane get his mask? That's an easy one, Conrad. Kane's masks are us.
See, I love that. I don't know why that makes me happy, but it does.
You and your old damn tired jokes. You have to get in every show, Conrad.
I asked a question,
big meanie,
and I laughed. You've been reading the message boards. What's up with T.L. Hopper? Why didn't he stick around?
Well, because there was a toilet that needed to be clogged in West Virginia, and he was the one to unclog that toilet.
Shawn wants to know, what was Jim Cornette's reaction to the Pillman news?
Disbelief. We were both in shock and extremely saddened. Man, you don't want to believe it when you hear that kind of stuff. But Corny was upset. We just didn't want to believe it.
Curtis wants to know, what was the deal with Vader's promo on Bret Hart? The best there is, the best there was. What a bunch of bullshit.
Well, I can tell you our reaction was, damn it, Leon, don't cuss.
Watching this back, how bad was it to see the really stiff chair shots that Shawn was giving the Undertaker?
Going back, in history and looking at that stuff, you just cringe. And yeah, it was bad. Yeah. But you know what? The one that Undertaker gave Shawn at the end of the night wasn't as bad as going back and the one that Shawn gave Undertaker earlier.
Matt wants to know, why did Farooq never win a singles title in the WWF? He mentions that because he's up for the IC belt here, but he never gets one.
Didn't need one. That's going to be my stock answer from now on.
Yeah. I mean, eventually people will just stop asking or listening. You're just going to do that, Tony.
Well, it was the booking committee's fault.
Listen to you. Was there anyone else considered for the role of Kane, or was it always supposed to be Glenn Jacobs?
Well, when we came up with the story for Kane, we were talking about Glenn Jacobs and opponents for the Undertaker. It all fit, so there wasn't anybody considered at the time. Anybody else considered at the time?
Let's talk about the bump that Shawn took from the cage. Was he talked into this? Did someone try to talk him out of it? Can you tell us anything about that?
It was Shawn's idea. It was something that he wanted to do to be special so that they could utilize all aspects of the cage. And that was something he really wanted to do.
Why did Vince leave announcing, and how long had he wanted to stop?
Vince had wanted to stop for quite some time, and that was the whole reason bringing Jim Ross in, even going back. And every time that we would bring in a new announcer, that was always Vince's intention, was to, God, Jake, gotta get me off commentary. So finally, I think with Jim Ross being in full time and Jim being there, finally Vince gave in and Vince finally got off. And I think the circumstances with Bret and everything else made it a lot easier to have happen.
Who is your favorite little wrestler?
Wee Willie Wilson.
We didn't mention it during the show recap, but during the Vader match, a couple of fans try to work their way into the match, and one guy even climbs into the ring. Any stories you can tell us about fans jumping in the ring here at the show?
Well, it was fans jumping in. There was a lot of heat on the Hart Foundation and the whole Canada USA thing. So there were people that were passionate, and it was during a time that people believed what they saw in the ring, and especially in a traditional wrestling market like St. Louis, that the heels were heels, motherfucker, and overzealous fans trying to get in and be a part of the action, and never, ever, ever a good idea. We used to have a rule back in the Mid-South that if the boys ever lost a bar fight or a fan hit the ring and they didn't beat the hell out of that fan, they were fired. They were gone. And that was a rule all across the country for the most part. If a fan hit the ring and you didn't look good in that fight, you were gone.
What was the deal with the Undertaker's teardrop tattoo on his face?
Did he have the teardrop here?
Yeah. Well,
it was, oh boy, this will get a lot of heat online, but I used to call the teardrop his gay pirate phase. I hated it. I didn't get it. I never knew, but he liked it. He liked the teardrop. He liked painting the teardrop on his face just to be different.
Was there ever talk of creating a minis title?
No, not a minis title, but there always was talk of having a minis division, but then it became the reality of trying to get personality out of them. The best minis were the Mexican minis from AAA, and to try and make a division out of guys that couldn't speak the language. And it just, no. To answer the question, short answer, no.
There's rumor and innuendo that Shawn and The Undertaker didn't really get along outside of the ring here. How did they enjoy working with each other?
They loved working with each other. It was a kind of a night off, but they really enjoyed working each other because I think that each one of them brought the best out of the other.
Was there ever any plans to have the Patriot win the world title?
No.
Where would you rank In Your House Bad Blood amongst all other In Your House shows? Is this number 1, number 2, number 3? Where does it fall?
As far as the turning point, it's going to be in the top 5 because, as we've said all throughout this show, it was a turning point for the business. And I thought overall it told a great story to take us to that next point in the business. So it's in the top 5.
How many stitches did Shawn need after this pay-per-view?
A little bit of super glue and you good as new, baby.
At this point in 97, did you guys already have an idea in mind that WrestleMania would feature Undertaker Kane?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the places we were going. We knew that we wanted to get to Austin, and we knew that at this point we were hoping that Kane was going to work and that we would do the blow off at WrestleMania.
Well, there you go.
All right, boys and girls, that's going to wrap us up for now. Let me go ahead and give you a spoiler. Yes, we are going to do Kane in long form with Bruce sometime soon here on Something to Wrestle. But tomorrow, we've got a brand new episode of Something to Wrestle. Brand new audio you've never heard because we have yet to record it. Of course, today, Bruce is on location working on SmackDown, but he'll be flying back in the wee hours of the morning tomorrow morning. And sometime after he wakes up, we're going to click record on a brand new episode of Something to Wrestle. And it's coming your way tomorrow. I know tomorrow's Saturday, but you're getting a very special Saturday edition of Something to Wrestle. Stay tuned. We'll be back before you know it right here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Rock on. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.